Chapter 81. Hogsmeade Village in November has reached the end of autumn, and winter is about to begin. After standing deep in the alley for a long time, Mundungus felt a little cold. He took out the half-empty bottle of fire whiskey from his pocket and wanted to take a few sips to warm his body. However, considering the upcoming transaction, he finally put the unscrewed bottle cap back on and put the bottle back into his windbreaker pocket. Damn guy! Mundungus stomped his feet in coldness, and the sound of stomping sounded in the deserted alley. We clearly made an appointment, why is he so late this time? He suddenly thought of a bad possibility. Could it be that the wizard discovered that I mixed some light salt water into the blood of the magical animals he bought, so he didn't plan to come? Impossible, he is not a potions master like Snape, and the potions that need to be brewed will not have such strict material requirements, right? Mundungus, whose full name is Mundungus Fletcher, is nicknamed Dung. His professional experience is very rich, and his resume includes but is not limited to, liar, thief, lobbyist, wizarding intelligence broker, smuggler of prohibited magic materials, nocturne alley roadside stall owner, unregistered door key holder. In addition to murder and arson, this guy has done almost all bad things. However, even after doing so many illegal activities, Mundungus still maintains the record of 0 enrollments in Azkaban to this day. This is because this guy has definitely invested a lot of time and thought in the skill of playing both sides. For example, more than 10 years after the rise of Voldemort, Mundungus took the initiative to find Dumbledore and joined the Order of the Phoenix. He took on the task of collecting intelligence from the wizarding world on his own. Until the fall of Voldemort, he was working for Dumbledore, and Dumbledore never wanted to find anyone else to replace him. This also shows that, regardless of his character, Mundungus' work ability is indeed recognized by the greatest white wizard of our time. When looking for him to buy magical animal blood rich in magical power, Quirrell actually found the right person. Of course, Quirrell has always hidden his identity, and Mundungus only knows that the person he is trading with is a wizard. Because Lord Voldemort needs to replenish his body, Quirrell cannot do without the blood of magical animals almost every day, and must drink at least half a pint, about 250 ml, every day. To be honest, his dependence on magic-rich blood is even more exaggerated than that of the previous vampires. If he were not looking for the wild Mundungus, but looking for someone else to buy it, Quirrell might not be able to buy a large amount of magical animal blood rich in magic power. Although the blood of magical animals is usually used to make potions, and those potions are generally normal trade items among the magic circles of various countries, the fact that the end product can be circulated does not mean that the raw materials can be circulated. As for the reason, I understand everyone understands that this is indeed a monopoly. Pure-blood wizarding families who have the ability to monopolize knowledge, the Slughorn family, and talents, the Dumbledore family, while those who have little ability, the Malfoy family and the like, can only monopolize limited magical resources. Ironically, the latter was once the main object of unity when Voldemort rose, but now he has become one of the biggest obstacles to the Dark Lord's resurrection plan. On the contrary, Mundungus, who was once an important member of the Order of the Phoenix, has now become Voldemort's helper in hanging his life. I have to say that sometimes, reality is more magical than fiction. What should we do next? George glanced over the abandoned furniture, retracted his head, and asked Fred and Bourne in a low voice. Although they had always been naughty and mischievous in the past, the twins had never had the experience of squatting together in what was suspected to be an illegal transaction like today. Neither of them had any good ideas at the time. This kind of thing depends on Bourne. During those years of wandering in the Warhammer universe, he inevitably entered the hive many times and saw all kinds of bad people and bad things. The first time he saw Mundungus, his brain automatically generated different action plans that could be divided into 2 categories, adding up to a total of about 17 or 18. One type of solution is very simple and crude. The first step is to go over and knock that person down. In the second step, whether it is using physical means such as the Great Memory Restoration Technique, or using memory magic or Verita Serum, you will definitely be able to find something useful in his mind. The third step is to make those things into a complete chain of evidence to correct the fact that Quirrell committed the crime, and leave all the rest to Principal Dumbledore to handle. But the problem is that although this kind of plan is very convenient to implement at the beginning, Bourne estimates that it will only take 3 punches and 2 kicks at most, no more, and if there are more witnesses, Mundungus, he will probably be dead, but starting from the third step, things get a little troublesome. Regardless of whether it is difficult to create a chain of evidence or whether the two-faced Quirrell will quibble, even if Voldemort's remnant soul is finally brought to justice, Bourne will actually be dissatisfied. Is that a matter of judgment? Is it a matter of putting Quirrell in Azkaban prison and handing him over to the Dementors? Since the vampire incident, Bourne accidentally purified the Horcrux that the heretic got from nowhere. Regarding blasphemous and degenerate items such as Horcruxes, Bourne's attitude became very clear: the Emperor is above, these things must be strictly purified. Purifying heretics and aliens is what the Astartes should do. Even some weak judges in the tribunal will not strictly enforce the matter of finding evidence. Therefore, after consideration, Bourne chose another response. Although it was a little troublesome at first, it should become easier to deal with later. Taking out the deformed lizard wallet that Grandpa Horace gave him, Bourne took out a bottle of Living Hell Potion, a potion made from mugwort and narcissus root powder, also known as it is the water of life and death. It can be used as a poison at high concentrations and as a very effective sleeping pill at low concentrations. Although this is something only learned in potions class in 6th grade, it's hard to resist the fact that Bourne has a grandfather who likes to cook small stoves for him. Every week, Horace would write extra letters to Bourne to correspondence about potions knowledge that was far beyond his current learning progress, and would also urge him to go to the potions classroom to practice on his own when there was no class. Keep your breath, Bourne reminded the Weasley twins before uncorking the bottle of Living Hell Potion. One of the benefits of being a library assistant was that he and Mrs. Pants learned many magical techniques for controlling the environment, in order to preserve all kinds of strange magical books, including a spell that worked like a mist humidifier. Misty. Because he worked in the library for a long time, Bourne was already familiar with this spell and could cast it silently. He tapped the mouth of the bottle of Living Hell Potion with his wand, and then pointed the wand at Mundungus standing deep in the alley. The potion in the bottle quickly atomized and turned into a hazy mist, which spread to Mundungus in an instant. Chapter 82. There was a hazy mist beside the Black Lake in the early morning. A little wizard in a vest was doing morning exercises, running laps around the Black Lake. A swallow-tailed dog followed him, and it started to stick out its tongue as it ran, and kept humming and panting loudly. "Ruth, are you okay? Just hold on a little longer," Bourne asked the swallow-tailed dog, who looked helpless as he ran. The Black Lake was huge, and even though he had not completely transformed into a Primaris Astartes, Bourne felt a little tired after running a lap. So after he finished his run, he took out 2 jars of tonics sent by Grandpa Horace, one for himself and one for Ruth. Licorice lemon flavor. After drinking it in one gulp, Bourne licked his lips and rubbed Ruth's head. "Ruth, isn't Grandpa Horace very powerful? At the very least, the potion he makes is 100 times better than Professor Snape's." Ruth nodded crazily, which seemed to mean, "You are right, as long as you don't continue to run around, if possible. I would like to drink another can." "I'm afraid this won't work. This tonic contains fire dragon blood and Remox blood. If you drink too much at one time, you might catch fire." Bourne waved his wand, cast a clean-up on himself and Ruth respectively, and then walked towards Hogwarts Castle with the dog wagging his 2 tails. "You have to eat better today. Because the Hogwarts Cup Quidditch Academy League will start its first match today. As one of the starting lineup, Bourne will also enter the field as a batsman today." Although Mr. Weasley promised to help contact him, firstly, time was tight, and secondly, he could not leave school for the time being. Customizing brooms required collecting personal data at the factory, so customizing brooms had to wait until he had Christmas vacation and left Hog. Just was. Horace could only buy him the same Nimbus 2000 as Harry's, but the style was different. His Nimbus 2000 used a pewter broomstick, which had better turning and emergency stopping performance and was more suitable for used by batters. "It's the first time I'm on the court. Although it's not much, I'm still a little nervous." Fortunately, Bourne has special psychological adjustment skills, just like maintaining and checking equipment before going to the battlefield is a habit of many Astartes. He used diamond brand polishing hardener to maintain the triple speed and Nimbus 2000 last night, and then my mind immediately relaxed. I did morning exercises when I was supposed to do them, and I ate breakfast when I was supposed to have breakfast. There was no sign of anything different from usual performance at all. Compared with Bourne, Harry was a little behind, even though Hermione took him and Ron to the trophy room 2 days ago. The little witch discovered a secret: Harry's father was also a Gryffindor Quidditch player, and James Potter was also a seeker like Harry, and he also carried the Gryffindor ball as captain. The team has won several Quidditch championships. According to her words, "Harry, you have a family background, so there must be no problem." Even with these bottom words and the encouragement from friends and teammates, Harry was still nervous before taking the field for the first time. He didn't even finish his breakfast, leaving a lot of bacon and potatoes for Ruth. The whole process was in a daze, and with Ron's help, Harry put on his Quidditch robes and full set of protective gear. The team uniforms they wore were crimson with a yellow stripe on the collar, which overall matched the color scheme of Gryffindor. Everyone also wore knee pads, elbow pads, helmets and finger gloves made of fire dragon skin. Very good, Bourne, very energetic. Come on, Harry, you can do it. Fred, kill those guys. The game started immediately. Before the players walked out of the lounge, just like his previous captain Charlie Weasley did, the current Gryffindor captain Wood patted the other 6 players on the shoulders one by one and gave them a warm welcome. Each person received different encouragement and praise. The reason why Oliver Wood was selected as the captain of the Quidditch team was not only because both Charlie and Professor McGonagall recognized him as the best goalkeeper in Gryffindor in the past 50 years, but also because he could be like Charlie. In the same way, we can twist the team together. In addition, when Wood plays the game, he also has a characteristic that only legendary Quidditch players possess, tenacity. And it's not just ordinary toughness, it's TM's special toughness. Unless he is maliciously injured and disarmed, such as a broken arm or leg, by some particularly dark and unscrupulous opponent, here specifically referring to Slytherin's Marcus Flint, all of his defenses are impeccable. Because the above method is so inhumane, all teams except Slytherin are actually particularly afraid of this extremely tough Wood. Our formation today is 1,1,5. A second before entering the venue, Wood reminded everyone loudly, everyone must go all out. There is one thing to say, even from the perspective of George and Fred, who are naturally adventurous, Wood's tactic is too radical. Although the 1,1,5 formation can play the most brutal offense, the pressure is also concentrated on the goalkeeper alone. There are 3 types of balls in Quidditch, the quaffle, the bludger, and the golden snitch. In addition to the hard rule that the seeker can only touch the golden snitch, both the batter and the chaser can touch the other 2 game balls, but the former must use a bat to touch the ball, as does the quaffle. Generally speaking, the batter's first task is to relieve the seeker from the pressure of being chased by bludgers at the decisive moment, and at the same time try to use bludgers to interfere with the opponent's seeker to capture the golden snitch. Before the decisive moment, the batsman must try his best to protect other players, and must be especially careful to prevent the opponent from using tactics to attack his own goalkeeper. Therefore, the most common lineup for Quidditch games is to leave one batter in the backfield and let the other batter take the initiative to roam around and attack. The 1,1,5 formation formulated by Wood allowed both batsmen to participate in the attack and did not provide support for the goalkeeper at all. If the opponent's batter hits the bludger, or if the chaser ignores offside or simply gives up possession of the ball and directly initiates a collision, the goalkeeper can easily be in danger. Although each team in Quidditch has 3 substitutes, these 3 substitutes are used to replace the chaser. The seeker, beater, and keeper have no substitutes and must hold on until the end of the game by themselves. Even if the players in these 3 positions are injured, if they don't want their team to lose the game, then they have to grit their teeth and persist until the end of the game. Therefore, by using such an extremely radical tactic in the first game of the league, it is difficult for Wood to deny that his choice was not without emotional factors. Kill the Slytherin team. Raising his arms and letting out a final roar, Wood then slammed open the door in front of him, and the noise in the playing field was instantly transmitted into the players' lounge. The first game of the Quidditch League was a crowd pleaser. Almost all the little wizards in Hogwarts came to watch this duel between old enemies. Gryffindor vs. Slytherin. Half of the auditorium was red and half was green. Supporters from both sides stood in front of each other and showed no weakness to each other. Chapter 83. Bourne didn't mean it. How could a sunny and cheerful boy hit Professor Quirrell with a bludger in the face? Even if he had to hit him, he would hit Quirrell on the back of the head. Isn't this more meaningful than a slap in the face? It's simply that the ball wants to show its loyalty too much. There is no other explanation, and there is no need to explain more. But Quirrell was still furious. From the swamp dig that was eaten, to the inexplicable roaring letter he received, from stopping the biting cabbage from attacking Harry Potter, to violently expelling the troll he brought back with great effort. One after another, one by one, these things that Bourne did are really in line with the saying, you don't drink when the leader toasts, and you turn the table when the boss picks up the food. You just want to fight with me. The more you endure for a while, the more you lose. The more you think about it, the more angry you become. Coupled with the uproar caused by Lee Jordan's Professor Quirrell plus 5 points, the two-faced professor's nose was almost crooked with anger. He wanted to take out his wand on the spot and shoot Avada Kedavra at this unfortunate child. As Voldemort possessed him for a long time, although he did not realize it yet, Quirrell's mental state became increasingly unstable. Fortunately, when Quirrell was about to reveal his true nature in front of almost all the young wizards at Hogwarts, someone gave him an enlightenment in time. Idiot! Familiar voices, familiar words, and Voldemort, who was so familiar with him that they shared the same body, stopped Quirrell's actions in time. Snape is sitting behind you. If you dare to cast a death curse on a little wizard, you will turn into 8 petals in the next second. In an instant, Quirrell calmed down. Remember what I said, rabbit hole, to create more chaos, that's what you should be doing right now. Yes, yes, my great master. Quirrell returned to his former appearance and replied timidly in his mind. Because of Marcus Flint's dismissal, the Slytherin team replaced a substitute chaser, but no one could replace the 2 missing batters. The Slytherin team had lost. As long as the audience can use their eyes, it is not difficult to see this, and the problematic words cannot be said like this. Especially if that person was in the stands on the Slytherin side. However, although a brain is a good thing, some people may really not have one. Damn it, I lost this one. Crabbe, one of Malfoy's 2 followers, made a fist with his right hand and punched his left hand hard, making a pop sound. Flint was talking a lot about it 2 days ago. Before the game, I overpowered them to win. 20 silver sickles, just gone. However, before he could finish complaining, the palm of Professor Snape sitting next to him made close contact with the back of the child's head. It's also a pop sound. Go to my office after the game and deal with a bucket of horned toads, Snape said coldly. This is the punishment for the little wizard's participation in gambling. Crabbe wanted to argue, but Professor, this bet was started by the Weasley twins. I'm so sorry. Draco quickly covered Crabbe's mouth to prevent him from continuing to talk nonsense. The little wizard would have been punished for participating in gambling activities. If you participate in a bet set up by Gryffindor and end up being cheated, then the result will be a double penalty. However, just like pressing down the gourd makes the gourd rise, little fat Gower actually said, Crabbe is right. Draco felt a little tired. The 3 of you, Professor Snape snorted, will go to my office to deal with the horned toads in a moment, 1 for each bucket. Unlike the atmosphere in the Slytherin auditorium where men were silent and women were in tears, the little wizards who supported Gryffindor were simply over the moon. 3 minutes, only 3 minutes. Against the Slytherin team, the Gryffindor team had never secured a victory so quickly before. This game was destined to be recorded in the history of Hogwarts, and everyone present was a witness to this event. When I talk about this game with other people in the future, they can all proudly claim, I watched it live. When players compete against each other in sports competitions, in addition to their training level, their momentum is also a key factor in determining victory or defeat. Gryffindor can be said to be in full swing at this time. Even though his dazzling performance that blinded everyone attracted the attention of the referee Mrs. Hooch, Bourne was unable to use the free throws using the rules and using the quaffle loop that Wood taught him. Special skills such as drawing a foul, flying side by side and elbowing the referee behind the back. But aren't there other players on the Gryffindor team? Under the influence of the momentum, the 3 female Gryffindor chasers known as the 3 Roses directly gave up the temptation to pass the ball. They very simply adopted the Parkins pliers and Tran tactics. Hard-hitting tactics such as Sylvania's feint and Eagle Head offensive formation. Because Slytherin no longer has a batter, the chaser's attack can only be dealt with by the chaser and the keeper. However, although in order not to be penalized and not to fight with the opponent's players, the 3-speed bat in Bourne's hand is not a fire stick, is it? The bludger, which had already proven its loyalty, would fly to the triple speed and wait for it again every time Bourne raised his arm, just like a yo-yo pulled by a rope. With each hit, the bludger would get closer to Slytherin's chasers and keepers, leaving holes in their defenses against Gryffindor's chasers. That can't even be called a loophole. After a few minutes, even goalkeeper Wood couldn't sit still and rode his broom directly to the front court to join this feast called scoring. From the beginning of the game to now, there is still in less than 20 minutes, Gryffindor scored a full 120 points. If this situation continues, within a few minutes, even if Slytherin's seeker catches the golden snitch first, Gryffindor will still win with a total score advantage. Lee Jordan, who was in the commentary box, kept making witty remarks like a eloquent tongue, and his voice was almost hoarse with excitement. "I protest." Snape couldn't stand it anymore and stood up to protest. As their dean did this, the little snakes in the Slytherin stands also stood up and protested and dissatisfied with the referee. "Examine the Gryffindor beater. I bet he opened it. Only colored pens can cheat. It's fun to cheat for a while, the whole family is in the crematorium." Their target was pointed at Bourne, and the reason was very practical. If there were no problems with the bludger and bat, how could they take the initiative to deliver them to Bourne every time? They suspected that the Gryffindor team had either secretly cast a flying curse or a confusion curse on the bludger, or that Bourne's bat had some other magic. In the Gryffindor auditorium opposite, many young wizards also stood up and accused Slytherin's little snake of not wanting a billion. What Slytherin is doing now is not even to stop the game, but to use public opinion to temporarily take Bourne off the field for inspection. Chapter 84. Bourne turned to look at the audience. He had seen this kind of scene where the broom was out of control before. In the first flying lesson, in addition to being attacked by biting cabbage, the little wizard's practice broom also had problems. However, the brooms they used at that time were all old Comet brooms, while Harry was riding a Nimbus 2000. You know, as a broom specifically for Quidditch competitions, one of the selling points of the Nimbus 2000 is to prevent someone from hacking the players during the game. It has done a lot of anti-jinx and anti-poison treatments, even the broomstick each branch of the tail is coated with anti-curse varnish. Bourne's eyes were fixed on the suspect, and with his sharp eyesight like a falcon, the lips of the two-faced professor were indeed moving. "The confusion spell that is powerful enough to interfere with Nimbus 2000, is it Professor Quirrell, or is it simply Voldemort himself who is causing trouble? That name is magical." Therefore, although Bourne did not directly say the word Voldemort, the guy also had a little sense of it. "Someone is talking about me, and that person is nearby. Sure enough, someone is beginning to doubt what happened recently," Voldemort thought to himself. But Quirrell knew nothing about it. As a host, his thoughts were completely one-way transparent to Voldemort. But on the other hand, Quirrell was unable to understand the thoughts of the parasite on his body. He obediently listened to Voldemort's words, insisted on implementing the rabbit hole tactic, and continued to release the powerful confusion spell on Harry Potter's broomstick. Even if the savior cannot be killed, he will still create a bigger commotion. However, Harry Potter not only flies very high on his broomstick, but Nimbus 2000 is also resistant to the confusion curse. Plus, he couldn't wave his wand openly and read spells out loud. Therefore, it is very difficult to achieve this level. In fact, Quirrell felt a little bit weak from casting spells silently over long distances. For this reason, he had to pour some drink into his mouth. The fire dragon blood newly bought from Mundungus was the only thing he could rely on at this time. How about the taste? The smell was not particularly strong, and it was not like the mouse tail juice he drank last time. Compared with the blood of some magical animals he had drunk before, the taste of this Peruvian venom-tooth dragon blood was above average. However, after taking a sip of blood, Quirrell smacked his lips and felt a strange astringency in his mouth. "If I had to use words to describe it, this feeling is like having a piece of melted rubber in your mouth, which is slightly astringent and has a bitter almond taste." Quirrell thought that this might be caused by trace amounts of toxins in the blood of the poison-toothed dragon. There might be some special alkaloids in the body of this fire dragon with poisonous teeth. "It's not clean. You won't get sick after drinking it." He could only comfort himself in this way. Unlike ordinary humans, wizards may have a certain resistance to many toxins due to taking magic potions for generations. What's more, if it was really poisonous, Voldemort wouldn't just sit back and watch him being poisoned to death. Except for a small part of the blood of the Peruvian fang dragon he drank, which was used to nourish his body, most of the remaining blood was mainly used to supply Voldemort to absorb magic power. Different from Muggle scientific principles, the wizard's definition of toxicity is closely related to magic power. If the fire dragon's blood contains toxins, it will mainly be borne by Voldemort, because it is he who absorbs most of the magic power in the blood. Then what happens next? Quirrell, who had regained some energy by drinking blood, looked up at the sky above the competition field. At this time, Mrs. Hooch had rescued Higgs, who was shouting and doing free-falling movements. Shock reduction and speed stop. This is a spell that referees in Quidditch matches must master. Its function is to slow down the falling speed of objects. It is the best choice for rescuing players who have fallen from high altitudes. After solving Higgs' problem, Mrs. Hooch immediately controlled the broom to fly diagonally below Harry, carefully controlling the distance from the out-of-control Nimbus 2000. She did this to prevent herself from being hit suddenly by the out-of-control broom and causing her to be unable to react in time. "Harry, jump off the broom. I'll catch you with a spell," Mrs. Hooch shouted to Harry. However, despite clearly hearing Mrs. Hooch's reminder, Harry still stubbornly held the sweeping handle and did not let go. It must be said that Harry has a talent for flying that ordinary people don't have, and his sense of balance and dynamic vision are excellent. Even though the Nimbus 2000 he was riding on had transformed into a crazy bull, constantly bumping and spinning, he still caught the golden snitch at a glance just now. "Hold on." Harry's stubborn temper rose, and he told himself in his heart, Gryffindor's first victory must have a perfect ending. He tried hard to break the handle and guide this disobedient mount closer to the sky above the golden snitch. His actions inevitably attracted some people's attention. Just like his damn father, this guy is also a brainless idiot. In the stands, Snape, who had just let go of his heart, couldn't help but let out a cold snort from his nostrils when he saw Mrs. Hooch rising into the air to save people. Of course, this potion master didn't just contribute to stopping global warming. He also raised his head and stared at some brainless idiot while softly repeating a spell. "Interesting. This former disciple of mine has really made great progress in these years, and he is almost able to release the all curses are ended independently. Not bad, very good, hey. Quirrell, try it and let me see where Snape's limits are." "It's Snape." The smart little witch Hermione noticed something was wrong, looked at the other side of the stand with a telescope, and immediately saw the potions professor who was mumbling something. As for Quirrell, whose lips were actually moving, Hermione didn't notice him because he was drinking. "He's reciting a spell." Hermione's discovery made Ron and the others completely panic. "We're going to report to Professor McGonagall," Neville suggested, and the chubby little wizard immediately stood up and wanted to run to the explanation table. He was pulled by Hermione. "It's useless, we have no evidence." "But even so, we can't let the old bat cast a curse on Harry." Ron questioned Hermione. "You guys wait here, I'll be back as soon as I go." Hermione obviously had her own ideas. "Pay attention to the signal I emit. If it fails, you guys can go to Professor McGonagall for help." Several young wizards wanted to say something, but Hermione had already turned around and slipped into a passage behind the stands, and quickly ran out of sight. "What signal is she talking about?" Ron blinked, indicating that he understood every word, but he still couldn't understand what Hermione said. Seamus and Neville also looked at each other. Chapter 85. Just like a child poking an ant with a stick, Bourne used the bat triple speed as a small stick to poke the unconscious Quirrell. Did he faint from anger? Then he raised his hands and looked obediently at the two professors McGonagall and Snape who hurried over. "I promise, Professor Quirrell was definitely not knocked unconscious by a bludger. Mr. Slughorn," Professor McGonagall ordered, "go and celebrate the victory with your teammates. Let our professor handle the matters here." Translated, this means, "You little wizard, don't cause trouble, just go away." Bourne obeyed the advice, got on his broomstick and ran towards the exit of the arena. Although he didn't get the expected bonus points for rescuing people, it at least confirmed where the two-faced professor used the blood of the Peruvian venom fang dragon he bought. This wave is not a loss. A few days later, in the trophy room, Bourne shared his discovery with a few of his teammates. Peeves exclaimed, "So, that stupid Quirrell actually drank the fire dragon's blood directly?" "Yes." Bourne nodded firmly. He also added, "It's just that after he drank the fire dragon's blood mixed with swelling potion, his body actually swelled like that, which is somewhat unexpected. But it's also a good discovery," Fred said with a smile and glanced at his brother. George immediately understood what Fred was thinking, and a smile appeared on his face. Really an interesting new idea. Well, these two fun lovers once again associated the application of this discovery with the field of pranks they are most familiar with and concerned about. Only Mr. Sherlock in the magic portrait, because he was a fairly knowledgeable wizard during his lifetime, understood what Bourne wanted to express. Generally speaking, swelling potion is a kind of external magic potion. It is a common first aid method for wizards. When a wizard is bitten by a poisonous magical creature, or is poisoned due to trauma due to other reasons, he can apply it immediately. Swelling agents work in such a way that toxins are temporarily concentrated in the swollen area. Using this first aid method can prevent toxins caused by trauma from spreading throughout the body, thereby preventing the poisoned person from being poisoned to death. This agent works by contact with the skin. In other words, if you accidentally take the swelling potion, the things that will become swollen should be the wizard's tongue, lips, throat, esophagus, or at most the intestines and stomach, and. As for Professor Quirrell, after drinking the spiked fire dragon blood, he inflated into a balloon as a whole. This means that when drinking the fire dragon's blood, Quirrell might be casting some kind of spell. Therefore, the fire dragon's blood, which is rich in magic power, carried the swelling potion and spread throughout his body, causing him to swell into a balloon. Although he did not go to the scene to watch the Quidditch match, the great detective still reconstructed some scenes at that time through reasoning and interpretation of clues. Then, they shared some information after the first game of the Quidditch League. Quirrell was finally rescued. The person who saved him was Snape. After several attempts to break the curse failed, the potion's master slapped his forehead and realized that he might have been blinded by the lamp. Anyway, he already knew that Quirrell was suspected of being a Death Eater. In the spirit of it doesn't hurt to give it a try, before Madame Pomfrey came, he poured a bottle of shrinking potion into Quirrell, who fainted without permission. As a result, he didn't know whether he should be happy or not. After taking a bottle of magic potion, Quirrell, who had inflated into a balloon, was transformed back to his original shape. And Quirrell woke up immediately and kept saying, "I'm fine, I can still hold on, I will definitely be able to do it." He even refused to be inspected by Madame Pomfrey, which made the old woman very dissatisfied that even Principal Dumbledore did not dare to offend. And the next day, even though Quirrell was tied up like a mummy, he still insisted on teaching the young wizards a lesson in black magic protection. It is a medical miracle. And this also made Snape, who had always had thoughts about this course, even more dissatisfied, so much so that he wanted to use a time turner to go back in time and give himself a big blow. However, when Quirrell was in class, many young wizards noticed that while he was teaching, he took the time to drink the magic potion he brought several times. According to him, this is a specialty he bought while traveling in the East, and it is particularly suitable for nourishing the body. Sister Paddle from India directly declared, "This must be the holy water flowing in the Ganges River, clean and hygienic." However, Hufflepuff's Justin felt that this was not necessarily an Indian specialty. "Maybe it's from Japan," he said. "I've seen one of their specials, and it's full of monsters with great bodies. Maybe they drink this specialty product." All in all, it has everything. But what is intriguing is that the little wizards only discuss these matters. No one carefully scrutinizes who drugged Quirrell, but even Principal Dumbledore did not investigate the matter seriously. On the one hand, it's because Quirrell has been actively avoiding it and has a very negative attitude, on the other hand, it's because this matter is really difficult to investigate. The culprit behind Quirrell's transformation into a balloon, according to Snape's speculation, was probably some kind of inflation potion that went wrong during the brewing process. However, the little wizards in the 1st and 5th grades, this potion is included in the Owl's exam, have all made this potion in class not long ago, and they all brought their results back to the dormitory. In other words, the 1st and 5th grade wizards are all suspects. This is difficult to check. Some young wizards who like conspiracy theories speculate that an unnamed old wizard may think that the position of defense against the dark arts is a consumer, so since Professor Quirrell has no big problems, then naturally there is no need for it. Study deeply. However, a few people in the trophy room, plus a ghost and a magical portrait, don't see it that way. Dumbledore had been walking the bird frequently before, and they had vaguely guessed that the principal probably also had some doubts about Quirrell. Dumbledore probably did not take action to clear up this hidden danger because he lacked evidence and was unable to characterize Quirrell's behavior. After all, Quirrell is an official professor who has signed the Hogwarts magical contract, and it is true that this guy showed some tricks, but not all. This is more difficult to do. The Weasley twins and Mr. Sherlock chatted for a while, and they were discussing what they should do next: continue to stimulate Quirrell and let him reveal more tricks? Or simply report everything they know so far to Dumbledore and let the wise old man make his own judgment? As for why the twins and Sherlock were mainly discussing it, it was because the other two members of the small team had different opinions. Peeves feels that there is no need to talk about the rules of the world when dealing with evil ways like Quirrell, and he should just hit hard. Chapter 86. Professor's Commander. Professor Sprout. Taking Bourne and the others to the greenhouse door of Professor Sprout, the head of Hufflepuff, Hagrid shouted at the top of his lungs before pushing the door open and entering. In the past 2 days, a color-changing giant snail has somehow appeared in a field in the greenhouse. Professor Scamander always comes to the greenhouse during the day to help eliminate insects. Is it Hagrid? Hearing someone calling him, Professor Sprout inside agreed, come in, just be careful about the glass box at the door. Professor Scamander remained silent. When Bourne and the others walked in, they found that the teacher of the Care of Magical Creatures class was squatting at the door, guarding the glass box in front of them attentively. Inside this glass box, there are more than a dozen mature, color-changing giant snails. The largest one is about the size of a volleyball, and the smallest one is about the size of an adult's fist. They are densely packed together. The mucus secreted from their abdominal and foot parts, about an inch thick, has accumulated at the bottom of the box. Professor Hagrid noticed the behavior of his second idol. The first one must be Dumbledore, so he lowered his voice as much as possible and greeted softly. Okay. Hagrid was almost behind Scamander. No matter how hard he concentrated, the old wizard found himself blocked by a shadow blocking the sunlight. It's Hagrid. You brought a few little wizards with you. What do you want? What are you doing? Hagrid curiously ignored the old professor's question for a moment and asked instead, what's so interesting about the color-changing giant snail? What did you discover? The color-changing giant snail is a magical animal whose shell changes color once an hour, and wherever it crawls it always leaves a highly toxic trail behind it. Plants that come into contact with it will turn yellow, become dehydrated, and even burn. However, this magical animal basically poses no threat to wizards. At most, it will cause a loss of harvests in vegetable gardens and medicinal gardens. Wizards usually do not eat them because they may carry parasites. However, it is said that wizards in France will use the meat of the discolored giant snails for cooking. The only valuable magical material on them is the mucus secreted from the abdomen and feet. This slime is acidic and corrosive, and is one of the few substances known to be capable of killing Horclap. At the same time, after dilution, this mucus is also the main raw material of many household cleaners, which is very effective in dealing with spotted mango. Oh, yes, Hagrid. Well, yes, I did find something. Although the situation of autism is much better than when he was young because he has gone through many storms in recent years, Scamander still seems a little disconnected from time to time when talking to others. Only when talking about content related to magical animals, this old man will show his professionalism and rigor as the number one in the industry. Although there are currently populations of color-changing giant snails in Asia, Europe, and the Americas, they are generally farmed by wizard cleaner factories. These farmed color-changing giant snails will be cast with confusion curses and variant spells such as the sex transformation suppression curse and the reproduction suppression curse when they are born. The purpose of this is to prevent them from hybridizing with common local snails and snails if they escape from the breeding farm. Because the emergence of hybrid species may violate the Secrecy Act, causing no mages to become aware of the existence of magical animals. Perhaps because he has lived in North America for a long time, Scamander's name for ordinary people who do not know magic has unconsciously become no mage, which is commonly used in the magic world there, instead of no mage in Europe. Muggle. But I just observed that after these color-changing giant snails got together, they unconsciously changed their genders, and some even began to mate and reproduce uncontrollably. This is what happens to wild color-changing giant snails. Characteristics, and wild color-changing giant snails now only exist in their native Africa. In the past 100 years, in order to maintain the diversity of its wild population, this native color-changing giant snail has been classified as a non-trade item by the Ministry of Magic of various countries, and individuals or companies are not allowed to conduct any form of private sales. This kind of restriction is very strict, even I have never raised it. Realizing some of the problems in his words, Scamander quickly said seriously, the color-changing giant snail that appears here must be contraband that someone secretly captured and brought back when they went to Africa, and then was put in somehow. This greenhouse. Fortunately, it was discovered early. Professor Sprout and I had already dug deep into the ground to clean up the place. Otherwise, allowing these wild color-changing giant snails to multiply uncontrollably would have caused some very bad consequences. After escaping, they may even cause an ecological disaster in the Forbidden Forest. It's so bad. Which little wizard put them in the greenhouse? We have to look back and find out who is so naughty. Hearing that the Forbidden Forest was almost affected, and thinking that those cute little guys had not lost their homes, a good old man like Hagrid also showed a rare hint of anger on his face. He turned around and glared at the Weasley twins who were following behind him. George. Fred. At this time, Professor Sprout also walked over, with some mud on his body, and his hands wearing thick dragon leather gloves tightly grasping a wild color-changing giant snail that was constantly twisting its carapace. This should be the last one, Senior Newt, she threw the color-changing giant snail into the glass box. This year's biting kale is all ruined. I have to talk to Minerva later and ask her to find out who did this. Last time, dozens of biting cabbages that were about to mature ran away together and almost injured a flying lesson student. The little wizard is actually because of the color-changing giant snails that lay eggs and reproduce underground. Even though I clearly spread enough nutritious ointment made from foxtail eggs when sowing, the highly toxic mucus they secreted still made the biting cabbage uncontrollable, so I took the initiative. Cut off the roots and ran out of the greenhouse. The head of Hufflepuff, who was also known for his good temper, was as angry as Hagrid at this time. I suggest you lay some devil's nets underground. The scaly skin of this magical plant is very thick and can resist the acidic mucus of the color-changing giant snails. Moreover, in addition to the color-changing giant snails, devil's nets can also prey on many other species underground. Pests, that's what a lot of the for-profit magic plant plantations over there in North America do. Scamander gave a professional meaning, and Professor Sprout followed suit and said that he would go back to other greenhouses to collect some devil's net spores. Seeing that the two big guys were having a lively conversation and were about to continue discussing related academic issues, Bourne quickly put his fist to his mouth and coughed lightly. Only then did Hagrid remember what he came to the greenhouse for. Sorry, Professor Scamander, he quickly got to the point and quickly told the story of the Bourne and Weasley brothers who wanted to apply for the Forbidden Forest Wardens. Like him before, Professor Scamander was naturally stunned for a moment, and even Professor Sprout, who was observing, was surprised. You know, Professor Sprout has been teaching at Hogwarts for more than 20 years, and is also the Dean of Hufflepuff, one of the 4 major colleges, but even she has never heard of this hidden student position in Hogwarts. Chapter 87. Hagrid had collected some fallen leaves, spread them out into a mattress, and placed the unicorn who was about to give birth on it. She was as white as pearls, her eyes were half open and half closed, and the horn on her head was shining brightly. Even though unicorns are about the same size as a mare, they are actually very strong. A herd consisting of dozens of unicorns has almost no natural enemies in the Forbidden Forest. Taylor Swift has been unable to eat since the day Hagrid liked to name the magical animals he knew. Even her companions only ate a few berries picked by her companions. Although unicorns cannot speak, they are actually highly intelligent magical creatures with moral values. Whether mating or giving birth, they will avoid other members of the group. The latter situation is often the most vulnerable moment for unicorns as adults, and they are easily attacked by other animals and poachers. Fortunately, these unicorns living in the Forbidden Forest are protected by Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, not only Hagrid, the Forbidden Forest Warden, but also the centaurs who also live on the outskirts of the Forbidden Forest will help expel some. A ferocious beast. But the problem is, neither Hagrid nor the centaurs have any experience in helping unicorns give birth. Moreover, this unicorn named Tiffany has just grown up, and this birth is her first child, and she also has little experience. In previous years, if he encountered this kind of situation, Hagrid would seek help from Professor Ketlebin. Now, because the old wizard was on leave due to illness, Hagrid turned to Scamander, who was teaching Ketlebin. Hello, Swift, my name is Newt, Scamander said softly as he walked up to the unicorn and knelt down to stroke her mane. Before coming over, he specifically let Swift see him tidying up his appearance, and also performed a clean-up technique. Unicorns have a slight mysophobia, and Scamander's purpose in doing this is to make pregnant Swift feel more comfortable and reduce her nervousness. He had a suitcase in his hands, set it down on the grass, fiddled with the knobs and opened it. There were branches of many kinds of magical plants with flowers on them. Several plants did not even bloom in this season. It was obvious that the old wizard had cast a spell on them. Scamander first took out a red oak branch and put the flowers in front of the unicorn's nose for it to sniff, but Swift had no reaction. Then, he took out another acacia branch and performed the same operation as before, except this time Swift sneezed slightly, and her bulging abdomen also trembled slightly. I probably know what's going on. It's not a big problem. Scamander stroked Swift's mane and wiped the sweat-stained hair very thoughtfully. The words of the old expert made Hagrid finally feel relieved. Merlin's beard, he said, as long as it's all right, it's all right. Bourne, George, Fred, since you want to take the qualification assessment of the Forbidden Forest Assistant, the first question is, explain the inspection I just did for Swift. How did it work? Is something going on? He nodded to Hagrid, signaling to the Forbidden Forest guard that there was no need to worry. After all, Unicorn Expectant Mother Swift's current situation is not serious, and her problems cannot be solved in a hurry. George and Fred looked at each other. Although they, the third graders, had taken the Care of Magical Creatures course and had read the textbook written by Professor Scamander, they were sure that they had never done anything like the old wizard just now in the class or in the textbook. Matter-related content. Why don't you think about it again? Let me give you a hint, the protection of magical animals is also a kind of magic. Magic requires intuition and some bypassing. Scamander looked at the three little wizards with a smile. When he saw Bourne looking at the wand in his hand, he knew that his problem had been solved. Professor Scamander, I got the inspiration from the material of the wand. Red oak, because wizards who use this wand material are usually considered to be grumpy people who are easily angered, so I guess the first time you check the red oak branch is to confirm whether Swift is angry or not. There is something dissatisfying about. Acacia wood, in wandology, is a magical material suitable for sensitive and delicate wizards. You used it to conduct inspections and produced results. I guess that may mean that the surrounding environment made Swift feel a little nervous, and then as a result, she was unable to give birth to cubs successfully. That's a perfect answer. I definitely wouldn't have been able to answer it at your age. 10 points for Gryffindor. Professor Scamander nodded with satisfaction. Hagrid, he then said to the guard of the Forbidden Forest, unicorns are very sensitive magical animals, and expectant unicorn mothers are even more so. If there is anything unclean nearby, they can sense it even if they are several miles away. However, judging from Swift's current situation, she did not make a big fuss and did not take the initiative to ask her companions in the group to wait nearby. Those dirty things are probably not dangerous. Dark magical creatures, I guess they are mostly ghosts wandering around in the forest. Then what should we do next? Hagrid was impatient and asked immediately, how about I go around and look for those ghosts and let them wander somewhere else? No need to bother, just find a way to ease the tension. With the strength of a unicorn, Swift will definitely be able to give birth to the baby smoothly. Scamander was certain. He asked Hagrid and several little wizards to weave a large net out of dry tree vines, then lifted Swift up onto it and dragged her all the way to a small river near the clearing. They lifted Swift up and led the unicorn mother step by step into the quietly flowing river until the water covered her chest. The buoyancy of the river water will reduce her weight burden, the flowing water can also massage her muscles, and the river water can also block our line of sight, these will make Swift feel relaxed. Scamander explained briefly, and then he took out a pocket watch from his pocket. Based on the normal delivery conditions of unicorns, plus the examination of her physical condition, Swift should be able to successfully give birth to the cub in 5 minutes at most. He adjusted the button of the pocket watch, which also has a timing function. We have to prepare for a new little life. It can only be said that Professor Scamander is worthy of being the most famous magical animal protection expert today. His understanding of magical animals is so accurate that it makes people feel numb. The count hand on the pocket watch rotated 3.5 times. About 3.5 minutes later, a cry similar to a baby's cry came from the water. According to Professor Scamander's arrangement, Hagrid immediately waded over and hugged Swift's weakened body, helping her out of the river little by little. The old wizard quickly walked to the bottom of the water, plunged into the water, and then emerged from the water with his hands wrapped around a big bubble stained with some silver-blue blood. With the support of Bourne and the Weasley twins, Professor Scamander walked to the shore on the soft mud of the river. Without taking a breath, he quickly turned his wand into a scalpel and gently made a gap in the bubble. Chapter 88. Isn't it just a death curse? So would Bourne. Who said that Chinook lightning disguised as all petrified can only cause people to be shocked by electricity? Moreover, even if the psychic lightning can be avoided, the short spear that breaks through the air will be the last straw that breaks the camel's back. Before taking action, Bourne's Astartes brain, which was specially designed for combat, had already predicted the enemy's prediction. A double strike of this degree could never be avoided by just dodging. The result was exactly the same. Quirrell, who was wearing a mask, was startled by the torrent of plasma, and then hurriedly hid behind an oak tree, with his back pressed against the trunk of the tree. Boom! Like a sniper rifle hitting its target, the centaur's short spear directly pierced the tree trunk, and the spearhead also pierced Quirrell's body. Like Newt, Quirrell, who is wearing a mask, does not use armor protection. The reason is the same, it's not that they don't know this spell, it's just that they were not the kind of wizards who particularly liked to duel or fight with others before. His waist was pierced by a short spear, and Quirrell was so painful that he almost passed away on the spot. However, at the critical moment of life and death, Voldemort, who was possessing him, finally gave up for once and did not directly give up on him as his host. The Dark Lord took over Quirrell's body, forcibly cutting off his sense of pain, then picked up the alder wand and pointed in the distance. Whoosh! A thin but extremely tough string shot out from the top of the wand and wrapped around the branches of a big tree dozens of meters away. Ravoxio! Quirrell's body was instantly pulled by the curse and flew far away, and the price of his violent escape was that one of his waists was completely torn apart by a short spear, and the fragments fell to the ground. In mid-air, Voldemort controlled Quirrell to transform into Spider-Man, repeatedly summoning the rope and reversing the flying spell. After a few times, Quirrell disappeared without a trace in the Forbidden Forest. Fortunately, Bourne and the others had a summoner here, and Professor Scamander immediately came up with the most reasonable response. Gun at gun, insect stick, guide insect. One piece after another, he took out a complete set of professional equipment from his suitcase, and from time to time he would put half of his body into the suitcase to rummage through it. Bourne, Hagrid, the Weasley brothers and the two centaurs were all stunned. George, I just doubted the size of this box. How did the invisible beast fit in it? Fred, it seems, maybe it's the invisible expansion charm. I remember my father said he wanted to use this spell to expand the garage at home, but my mother said it was illegal, and as the director of the Office of the Ministry of Magic, it must not be done. If you do that, you are committing a crime knowingly. Hagrid thought the box was interesting, but Ronan the Centaur and Bane didn't have much knowledge and had no idea what the box meant. As for Bourne, he severely injured the dark wizard Quirrell, who he regarded as a playing card. At this time, he had returned to the appearance of a young wizard. He was looking at Professor Scamander with great interest. That suitcase. Grandpa Horace gave him a wallet made of deformed lizard skin. The skin was almost the maximum body size that a deformed lizard could normally grow. But now he was surprised to find that although Professor Scamander's suitcase was painted with a layer of leather paint, the patterns and textures on the bottom layer were still quite neat, with no obvious traces of splicing. If his guess is correct, Professor Scamander's suitcase seems to be made of a completely transformed lizard skin. As expected of a boss who writes books that can be used as textbooks. This Professor Scamander must usually carry money in sacks. The value of his suitcase alone can probably buy a row of shops in Diagon Alley. For a moment, Bourne even had the idea of writing books to make money in the future, but he gave up after a second thought. After all, there are only a handful of people who can write books that make them famous. On the contrary, readers who read books are often the real rich, handsome people. Okay, I'm going to track that guy. Professor Scamander, who put on new equipment, said very formally, let's track that guy who escaped. Don't separate. After saying that, he pointed his oak wand to the sky and fired a cluster of dazzling red sparks. In the dark night, this red spark can be seen even from a long distance away. Moreover, this spark for help also contains a kind of spell fluctuation with a specific frequency. A powerful enough wizard can feel this fluctuation even if he doesn't see it, as long as the distance is not too far away. For example, there is a certain greatest white wizard who sleeps a lot less because he is getting older. The old man was looking attentively at a document that was urgently sent from the Secretariat of the International Federation of Wizards. In addition to being the chief wizard of the British Wizengamot and the principal of Hogwarts, he is also the president of the International Federation of Wizards. Dumbledore was almost reading the document of only 3 or 4 pages of parchment carefully word by word, frowning from time to time. He looked at it so seriously. So much so that he didn't even notice when several chocolate cockroaches piled candies and crawled out of the jar with the lid open in his hand. Because this emergency document conveys a message, times have changed. And just when the old man picked up a quill customized by literary residents and was about to write a reply to the Secretariat, he suddenly felt a special spell wave. In the Forbidden Forest, it was Newt who sent a signal for help. Because of the authority of the Hogwarts principal, Dumbledore immediately understood the general outline of the matter. He took off the spectacles on his nose, stood up from the chair, and turned to look at the Forbidden Forest through the frosted rose window. In the sky, a cluster of red sparks was blooming with dazzling light. Fox, Dumbledore called softly. The half-asleep fire phoenix standing on the perch opened its eyes instantly and let out a slightly dissatisfied cry, but it quickly flew to the arm held by its master and partner. "Sorry to disturb your rest." After stroking his old friend's feathers as an apology, Dumbledore said, "Take me to the Forbidden Forest as quickly as possible." Before he finished speaking, with a burst of sparks flying special effects, Fawkes and Dumbledore apparat in the principal's office. Professor Scamander did not let Bourne and the others separate from him, mainly because he was worried that when he was tracking the Dark Wizard, the latter might come back very insidiously. Hagrid was a little worried about the unicorn Swift and her cubs. However, 6 adult male unicorns suddenly walked out of the bushes, making him completely put aside his worries. This was also expected by Professor Scamander. Swift had just waved her mane and tail to signal her companions for help with magic. Counting the time, it was enough for the herd to respond. Even if unicorns will try to avoid seeing the same kind of childbirth due to their moral values, the addition of a newborn is a major event for the group after all, and they cannot hide away and ignore it. Chapter 89. "You damn fool!" Voldemort yelled. The back of Quirrell's head was buzzing, but he no longer had the energy to explain himself or beg for mercy. "You don't need to sleep for a long time while you are alive, you will sleep forever after you die. Voldemort also understands Pua, what you need now is not rest, but hard work." He forcibly took Quirrell's body, causing the man to walk a short distance into the dense forest involuntarily, and found a humming dwarf pig monster. The dwarf pig monster looks like a stunted pig, with long legs, a stubby tail, squinted black eyes, and a somewhat human-like face. This magical animal likes to sneak into the pig pen and eat the sow's milk with the piglets. If left unnoticed for a long time, the pig monster will grow. The longer it goes, the bigger it grows, and the more damage it will cause to the farm it enters. They are particularly fast-moving and difficult to catch, and can only be driven away by albino hounds. Wingardium Leviosa. Using the levitating spell to control the dwarf pig monster, Voldemort flicked his wrist and made Quirrell's alder wand rotate counterclockwise. The dwarf pig monster seemed to have been thrown into an oversized wall-breaking machine. In an instant, its entire body was minced into a pool of blood. Unlike Muggles' scientific-based understanding, wizards view blood as a carrier of magic power. The proportion of blood in an organism is related to their natural magic power. The dwarf pig monster's magical ability is not very powerful, and its innate magic is more reflected in the curse that can bring misfortune to the farm owner. Therefore, even if Voldemort used magic spells to squeeze everything out, even the fishy internal organs, all a dwarf pig monster could provide him was less than a pint of blood. In terms of quality, the blood of dwarf pig monsters is far inferior to the magic-rich blood of powerful magical animals that he bought from Mundungus before. But he had blocked Mundungus. "You tolerate the fact that the product you sell contains rat tail juice. It's supposed to supplement collagen, but it's actually mixed with the remnants of a magic potion from unknown sources." For such a black-hearted vendor who dares to add technology and ruthless work to the food he sells, even Voldemort would find it difficult not to have murderous intentions for him. "It's safer to squeeze the juice yourself," Voldemort thought to himself. Then, while controlling Quirrell and swallowing the floating pig monster blood into his mouth, he continued to instill in his slave that pure natural food without any conscience, if he had any. How clean and hygienic, it's not his mouth and intestines that are used anyway. All he needs is to use this dwarf pig monster to replenish the magic power in his body. Whew! Quirrell drank the pig's blood, and Voldemort felt the magic begin to replenish the man's tired body, and his weakness was relieved. "Come here, do you want to eat a few more magical animals tonight and then go back to the castle?" Voldemort began to think about a question. He felt that he should now be rid of the freak little wizard Bourne, and the also freak Newt Scamander. And eating a dwarf pig monster actually only replenished his previous spell-casting consumption, and did not give him enough satisfaction. If he returns to the castle now, the next few days will become a bit painful, hanging around with Quirrell, starving for 9 meals in 3 days, which also makes Voldemort more and more dissatisfied with this slave's ability. "Tell me, why can't you be a rich pure blood? In that case, there is no need for me to go hunting in the Forbidden Forest at night. Can't I just buy legal magical animal blood directly from the potion material store? Buy it all at once, 2 glasses, drink 1, pour 1. He had already made up his mind to find some trouble when he went back tonight and arrange a whipping education for Quirrell again. Oh no, it was for physical exercise. This guy is so bold. Professor Scamander exclaimed in surprise while sharing the information brought back by the guide bug with Bourne and the others. He originally thought that the dark wizard wearing a mask, Kilo, no matter how bold he was would be running away now. You know, that guy was not only poaching in the forbidden forest of Hogwarts, he also cast an unforgivable spell in front of a professor. Why, do you think that you are a imprisonable but uncensorable talent who can easily enter and leave Azkaban? Or maybe you just look down on me, a terminally ill, autistic, old man who can only take care of some cute animals? He is still hunting other magical animals. Scamander said angrily. Because there was a guide exploring the path hundreds of meters away, he didn't have to worry about his voice being heard by the dark wizard in the distance. 1, 2, oh no, it's 3 dwarf pig monsters. Looking at the circles of ancient magic patterns flashing from time to time on the bug stick, the old professor simultaneously translated this information similar to Morse code. Come out. After hearing this, Bourne couldn't help but feel a little speechless. He didn't know whether this was Quirrell's or Voldemort's operation. By staying in the Forbidden Forest and continuing to hunt magical animals, he might be able to understand their thinking. This is what the saying goes, the thief never steals his money. However, they hunted 3 pig monsters, 3 little pigs. Did they think they were big bad wolves or albino hounds? I want to stop that guy's violence. Professor Scamander said briefly, and then became taciturn. Bourne felt that the old wizard at this time had a temperament that was familiar to him. After the battle, he needed to wear the pain gloves to give himself the Emperor's Fist of Peace. The fighting creed of the Imperial Fist is, strike the enemy where they are strongest and drive shame into their broken bodies. The hunting efficiency is still too low. After eating 3 pig monsters in a row, Voldemort actually felt much better, not counting Quirrell's instinctive vomiting reaction. He's a little swollen again now. Let's just set a fire in the Forbidden Forest. The fire spell is very good, he. He wanted to use fire to force out more magical animals, and then have a good meal. Moreover, this has another advantage, that is, it is consistent with his rabbit hole theory. It can create obstacles for Dumbledore and make the professors at Hogwarts busy. If something goes wrong in the busy work, the castle will be destroyed. If things get messed up, wouldn't he just be able to find the Philosopher's Stone? Voldemort still misses the stone because it is the key to his resurrection. Even drinking the blood of magical animals can replenish magic power. But doing this is just like hunting dwarf pig monsters now, which is too inefficient. Secondly, doing this itself is an emergency measure of treating the symptoms but not the root cause. Although Quirrell could be forced to drink the piggy's fishy blood, Voldemort was absolutely willing to do the same after he was resurrected. So, he controlled Quirrell to raise the Alder Wand, preparing to summon a ball of fierce fire to bring some warmth to the creatures in the Forbidden Forest. However, just as this guy was about to put his idea into practice, a buzzing sound of flapping wings suddenly reached his ears. Chapter 90. Although Voldemort broke through the defense, in order to maintain his image, he kindly performed Forget All on the host. Of course, he did not forget to arrange an additional whip exercise training session for him afterwards, euphemistically called it to care for the physical and mental health of his subordinates. Among the magical animals in the Forbidden Forest, except for the 3 unlucky pig monsters, the other magical animals were basically unaffected tonight. The unicorn Taylor Swift has become a mother, which is actually a good thing. Another happy event is that both the Bourne and Weasley twins passed Professor Scamander's test. The 3 Forbidden Forest Rangers will be able to take up their posts with certificates immediately, and even get the Hogwarts certificate. Imperial Grain. The lovable little con also made great contributions to Gryffindor this night. This is the first time since the establishment of Hogwarts that a pet has earned extra points for its owner. Its feat, praised by the Weasley brothers, also made the little wizards in Gryffindor fall in love with it. As for it, those little witches naturally love it even more. In this relaxed and happy atmosphere, time has arrived in December unknowingly, and the Christmas vacation that the little wizards have longed for is approaching. Regarding the question why do wizards celebrate Christmas, Bourne was actually skeptical at first. But when he saw the various advertising columns added to the Daily Prophet as soon as December entered, as well as the dazzling array of discount coupons in Diagon Alley, he instantly understood the role of this festival in wizarding society. Customers want to consume, businesses want to make money, both parties have to have a suitable reason. Wouldn't a consensus be reached by celebrating Christmas? No matter if it is Brother's birthday, Merlin's birthday, or the birthday of the pagan god of agriculture, it would be great if everyone could have a happy time. Although Bourne has been very busy recently and has no sense of such a holiday that is seriously suspected of being made up, he still prepared a Christmas gift for all the friends he knew. To put it bluntly, Bourne is definitely a good enough friend to be able to do this. Because, for more than a month, he was definitely one of the busiest people in Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. In addition to daily class study, he also did many things. At noon on 135, he was going to the library to help Mrs. Pants organize the books. On the night of 246, he would follow Hagrid or Professor Scamander into the Forbidden Forest to patrol. On Saturday morning, he would be on time to attend Professor McGonagall's Transfiguration Club. Every other day, he must attend Quidditch training organized by Wood in order to prepare for the Sunday morning league. After all this, he has recently started a very important long-term project. Ever since he had an encounter with the Schrödinger State Dark Wizard, Quirrell/Voldemort, in the Forbidden Forest, he realized that he had a shortcoming in magic. There were too few spells that he could use in battle. As we all know, the vast majority of Astartes warriors suffer from a terminal disease called phobia of lack of firepower. Bourne is no exception. Just like the Greenskins always pursue a stronger, bigger, and fiercer big tug, the warriors of the Astartes have no end to their pursuit of combat power. The total petrification spell that can be transformed into psychic lightning cannot meet his needs at all. Although the old saying goes you have to eat in one bite, except Ruth, if you want to learn more spells, you must be determined to learn them one by one step by step. After all, without the system by his side, it is impossible for Bourne to shout dark blue plus points and then immediately learn a new skill. However, Bourne is not helpless if he wants to take shortcuts. His mastery of the all-petrification curses and the Ashenic lightning mutated by them has fully proved that some of the magic spells in the Harry Potter world are actually all effective as long as the underlying principles are mastered. Possibly converted into Ashenic spells from the Warhammer universe. You know, unlike the various magic spells in the Harry Potter world that are becoming more and more life-oriented, most of the Warhammer psychic magic is for war and combat. They are more dangerous, but they have to admit that the power they display is also more powerful. Even if the psychic communication magic seems to be just for transmitting information over long distances, with slight changes, it can actually become a terrifying killing technique that can sublimate the brain from a distance, in the physical sense. Although Voldemort should not have the quadratic law of the saints, he cannot be defeated twice with the same move. Bourne does not want to gamble on the odds against his enemy. In addition, despite purifying this heresy through physical means, Bourne has enough confidence in himself. But in terms of magic, he had to admit that a young wizard like himself was indeed no match for the Dark Lord at the moment. In the past month or so, he and his friends have not given up on the investigation of the two-faced professor. As a result, Bourne discovered that except for the constant sweating on his forehead during class and the increase in the number of trips to the bathroom, Quirrell did not have any other symptoms that a seriously injured person with a broken waist should have. Even the next night in the Forbidden Forest, he gave the young wizards a defense against the dark arts class as normal. Needless to say, the reason why Quirrell was able to survive was because Voldemort opened the blood lock for him. Being able to make 7 Horcruxes is enough to prove how afraid of death this heretic is, in other words, how he must have hundreds of millions of tips on escaping death. Therefore, out of strategic importance to his opponents, Bourne finally chose to start trying to psychicize the magic spells he had learned. For more than a month, whenever he had time, he would go to the room of requirement on the 8th floor of the castle to conduct research on his own. Through research, he discovered that the spells in the first grade charms class actually had many connections and similarities. For example, unlocking spell and levitating spell. The reason why a Lejo cave can open a locked door is that it borrows part of the characteristics of Wingardium Leviosa to allow the lock cylinder, or door latch, to open, float together and then rotate, and then locked things such as doors and windows can be opened. However, the spell of the unlocking curse is a single function of the levitating curse that was solidified after repeated attempts by many wizards, so its spell sounds completely different from the levitating curse. In addition, a Lejo cave opening can open Muggle electronic locks, because electronic locks also have physical structures such as lock core and latch, but they cannot be opened and rely on the magnetic force generated after power is applied to realize the locking concept. Something. If you want to open that kind of magnetic door, you must use an older and more violent unlocking spell such as Open Sesame. Another example is Passepartout and left and right separation. The former is a spell invented to facilitate wizards' travel and ensure smooth roads. Before Kelly Xiao was invented, it was also used by some wizards to relieve the symptoms of tracheal obstruction when they were sick. However, because this was risky, it had to be cast by a professional therapist. Chapter 91. April 12th, the weather was sunny. At 5 o'clock in the morning, Bourne opened his eyes habitually. After washing, he prepared to go for morning exercises. He planned to have his last breakfast before the Hogwarts holiday, and then go to Hogsmeade Village to catch the train back to London. Grandpa Horace said he would wait for him at the station. But when he ran into the castle gate from the Black Lake with the panting Ruth, and then walked into the banquet hall and canteen next to it, he saw an unexpected person appear here. "Grandpa Horace, why are you here?" Bourne was a little surprised and ran over, but still obediently hugged the old man whom he had not seen for a long time. At this time, for the first time, the former head of Slytherin House was sitting next to the long table commonly used by Gryffindor. He was wearing a full waxed hunting suit and was holding a half-eaten bacon sandwich in his hand. The house elf Momo also followed him. She was so excited that she shed tears after seeing her little master whom she hadn't seen for months. Bourne also hugged Momo, and finally he urgently woke up the little Con, who was still sleeping soundly until just now, wearing a nightgown and using the thick hair of Russ as Simmons and quilt, so that he could perform for Momo. After a very exciting show, he finally managed to persuade the house elf who was too emotionally explicit. At the same time, he also inevitably noticed that 2 large suitcases with S marks were stacked on top of the long table, as if Horace was going on a long trip for some reason. Seeing that Bourne was slightly lost in thought looking at those boxes, Horace immediately smiled and said, "Bourne, hurry up and eat something. We have to rush to Hogsmeade in a while, but it's not going to London by train. Remember to customize. What about the broomstick? Let's go to the broomstick factory today." Bourne asked with some surprise, "Grandpa Horace, how do we get to the broomstick factory? Did you also bring a broomstick so that we can fly there together later?" As far as he knew, his uncle usually liked a comfortable life and had no interest in things like riding a broomstick. Bourne had never seen Horace's broomstick before when he lived at home. A smile appeared on Horace's face, as if his plot had succeeded, and he said slyly, "I told you in advance. What kind of surprise is that? Get ready, I guarantee you will be very satisfied with my arrangement. This will definitely be a surprise for you, an experience of a lifetime." Because it was a holiday today, many little wizards were sleeping in. They were going to get on the train in Hogsmeade Village and then have something to eat on the train. There was no one in the banquet hall, but after Bourne had breakfast, he changed into a set of the same oil wax hunting suit that Horace specially prepared for him. Since he had already communicated with Professor McGonagall and Principal Dumbledore, Professor Slughorn did not need to say any more greetings. He took Bourne directly out of Hogwarts Castle and walked all the way down the mountain to Hogwarts. Nearby, but they did not enter the village. Horace took out a tourmaline table lamp with a copper base and a green lampshade from the suitcase. It looked like an antique. "It is a home-type door key that I applied for from the Ministry of Magic. The movement during transmission is slightly smaller, and the side effects during transmission are also slightly lighter." Horace placed the porte-clés on the ground. "Now, listen to my command and let's touch this lamp together. Attention, countdown, 3, 2, 1. When Horace counted to 1, he immediately stretched out a finger to touch the lampshade of the desk lamp, and Bourne stretched out his finger in a similar manner. Then, Bourne felt as if he was thrown into a washing machine and began to spin rapidly around the desk lamp. The strong centrifugal force suddenly made his body parallel to the ground. However, because of the magic on the door key, his fingers were still firmly stuck to the lampshade. Several times the acceleration of gravity was exerted on him in an instant, just like the gravity overload experience usually only experienced by fighter pilots and astronauts. Of course, for Bourne, this level of gravity overload is not so much a test as it evokes some nostalgia for the past. However, this nostalgia only lasted a few seconds, because the experience of gravity overload soon gradually weakened. As Horace just said, this tourmaline desk lamp is a home version of a door key registered by the Ministry of Magic. Although its transmission distance is limited, the transmission experience, dense fog, is much better than ordinary door keys. The complete transmission process lasted about 7 seconds before Bourne's feet touched the ground again. As expected of the Slughorn family, Horace looked at Bourne with a smile and praised. Horace was very satisfied that little Bourne did not suffer from dizziness, vomiting or other adverse reactions when using a door key like some weak wizards. Bourne looked around and found that the place where their grandfather and grandson arrived using the porte-clés was on the side of the road at a road intersection. There was a road sign with a crossbar on the top standing next to it, but only the writing on it was bare. Contour. Not far behind them, parked was an old dark green Muggle car that looked very dated. It was also a convertible with 2 large suitcases piled on the back seat. "Momo has already brought our luggage here for us," Horace explained to Bourne while leading Bourne towards the car, when you learn to apparate when you are 17, we can do it without a portkey yet. Come on a trip that just comes and goes. Hey, that's authentic. Walking to the side of the classic car, Horace asked Bourne to sit in the passenger seat, while he expertly started the ignition, shifted gears, stepped on the clutch, and started driving. This Dwesenberg was when I was young and wrote to Newt's commander, the uncle of the little wizard Theseus you knew, who is now the career of magical creatures class at Hogwarts. Substitute professor, let him buy me a Muggle automatic carriage from America. Horace proudly showed off to Bourne, fasten your seat belt, this Muggle carriage is going very fast. It is said that the Muggle craftsman hid dozens of horses in the car, although I never found it. No trace of the stretching spell. After saying that, he lightly stepped on the accelerator pedal, and Dwesenberg started to speed at a speed of 7 or 8 miles. Several times, listening to the abnormal buzzing noise coming from the engine, Bourne wanted to help Horace change the gear that had not been changed since the start. However, he still resisted the urge to take action, because experience told him that correcting the driver's driving habits could easily displease the machine spirit. Little Bourne, now you know why I asked you to put on a hunting suit. How exciting it is to drive around. Like an experienced driver, Horace only controlled the steering wheel with his right hand and leaned his left elbow on the car door. Fortunately, there weren't many people on this road. Otherwise, if he were driving a left-hand drive car on the right and in the opposite direction, he might not be able to drive very far and get into a traffic accident. Unknowingly, accompanied by the hum of the engine and the popping sound of the exhaust pipe, they arrived at a village inhabited by dozens of families. We're here. Horace stepped on the brakes, remembering to change the gear to neutral, and then turned the key to turn off the engine. Chapter 92. Worry causes headaches. Harry had another headache last night. Although no one has ever been able to mark the specific location of Hogwarts on a map due to magic, but relying on some geography knowledge he learned in Muggle primary school, he still felt that this magic school was most likely located in the north of Britain. Because the winter here is too cold. As soon as December arrived, Harry put on a thick sweater. In the whole dormitory, it seems that only Bourne, who is the strongest, still maintains the habit of going out for exercise every day. As for Harry, his favorite thing to do in recent times is to spread out on the soft sofa in the Gryffindor common room and warm himself by the burning fireplace. Even in the Quidditch training organized by Wood, since he had to stay in the biting cold wind for an hour or two, he had several times thought of finding an excuse to take leave. Of course, it was just a thought. An angry Wood was much scarier than the cold wind. Except for the first 1 or 2 months of school, the title of savior could make the senior wizards look up to him, but in fact, Harry felt very uncomfortable at that time. As time went by, Hogwarts students were all getting used to seeing Harry as an ordinary first-year wizard. In the eyes of all the teachers and students at Hogwarts, there is a first-year wizard who is anything but ordinary. That little wizard is Bourne. What are you thinking about? Harry rubbed his head and sat up from the bed, feeling a little ashamed of the jealousy he had just felt. Obviously at the beginning, he complained to Ron and the others that he, Harry Potter, actually just wanted to be an ordinary little wizard, and whoever wanted that bullshit savior title would want it. He looked out from the window of the dormitory and found that the castle was covered with nearly a foot of snow. The black lake in the distance was also covered with hard ice, and the entire Hogwarts castle was covered in silver. Wrapped scene. The cold wind rattled the windows, but because there was always a roaring fire burning in the Gryffindor common room, and the heated water brought heat into each dormitory through the copper pipes, Harry and the others, this dormitory is actually quite warm. Today is the Christmas holiday. A few days ago, during a potions class, Draco Malfoy deliberately said something weird. I really feel sorry for those people. They have to stay in Hogwarts for Christmas because their family members don't want them. He looked at Harry with evil eyes as he spoke, while Crabbe and Goyle snickered. Harry was weighing a portion of pulverized lionfish spines and ignored them. In fact, Harry himself had no desire to return to Privet Drive for Christmas. Last week, Professor McGonagall made a special trip to the Gryffindor common room to register the list of students staying at school for the holidays, and Harry immediately took the initiative to sign his name on it. He didn't feel sorry for himself at all, but felt that this might be the best Christmas he had ever had in his life. Ron and the Weasley twins also stayed at Hogwarts because their parents were going to Romania during the holidays to visit Charlie, who had just graduated last year and went directly to work in a dragon farm. So, when he got up today, he and Ron were the only 2 people left in the 4-person dormitory. However, Ron got up earlier than him. Not only had he gone to the restaurant and had his share of breakfast, but he also brought him some pies and cakes. Harry, why don't you look so good? Is it a headache caused by a cold? As he spoke, Ron was breaking apart a haggis pudding with his hands, breaking it into pieces and feeding it to his pet mouse. Ban ate with gusto. You still don't look well today. Do you want to go to the medical room? George and Fred said that Madame Pomfrey asked Professor Sprout for a lot of herbs and made a large pot of decoction to treat colds. They had caught a cold while patrolling the Forbidden Forest in the middle of the night, so they went to the medical room to order 2 cold decoctions. Although hot steam will be sprayed out of the ears after drinking, their illnesses are completely cured after the spray, and they become lively again. Although Bourne has never taken the initiative to talk about becoming a ranger of the Forbidden Forest, the Weasley twins are just 2 little trumpets. After the 2 of them announced it, almost all the students at Hogwarts knew about it within a few days. This caused a little trouble for Hagrid and Professor Scamander. Many young wizards also wanted to try and see if they could also get the opportunity to have a legal adventure in the Forbidden Forest. The result was not ideal. Professor Scamander rejected them directly. The reason was, the quota of Forbidden Forest Rangers was already full. George and Fred are really lucky. After feeding the pet mice, Ron sat down next to Harry. Now, in addition to being able to go on night walks in the Forbidden Forest without violating school rules, they can also receive a pocket money every week. More importantly, they both gained points for Gryffindor after becoming coordinators of the Forbidden Forest, which almost offset the points they had deducted this semester. For this, my mother specially wrote a letter to thank Bourne. Thanks to him, he found out from the book that Hogwarts actually has such a position as the Forbidden Forest assistant. You found it in the book. While eating the pie that Ron brought him, Harry said vaguely, I thought this was what his grandfather, Professor Slughorn, told him. After all, the professor is the former dean of Slytherin. At such an old age, he must know. At this point, Harry seemed to have thought of something and quickly swallowed what was in his mouth. Is Hermione still looking into that Nick Flamel thing? Yes, she even made a list for me before going home. Ron said with a grimace. She said that the 2 of us should stay at school during the Christmas vacation and go to the library to check out the Directory of Contemporary Magical Masters, the Great Discovery of Modern Magic, research on the development of modern witchcraft and the books The Great Wizards of the 20th Century. Just by looking at the names, you can tell that these books must be thick and hard tomes, they must have been carefully kept by Mrs. Pants in a safe bookshelf above. I don't understand, why don't you agree to ask someone? For example, Bourne. He might know who Nick Flamel is. After all, he is the assistant librarian of the library, and he found the position of Forbidden Forest coordinator from Hogwarts, a school history. He must have read a lot. Harry hesitated. However, he finally decided to try the method he suddenly came up with first. If they still can't figure out who Nick Flamel is, it won't be too late for them to consult Bourne. Perhaps because of the closing of the world line, even though Harry, Ron, and Hermione did not meet the troll in the bathroom on Halloween, they still had incidents in the previous vampire attack, a lot of interactions. The experience of working together to fight against the brutal vampires allowed the 3 young wizards to bridge a series of conflicts caused by the unformed midnight duel with Draco Malfoy. This iron triangle is still very stable in Hogwarts. Chapter 93. Nick Flamey. Upon hearing the name of the person that the 2 young wizards asked him about, Professor Binns was startled for a moment, and then naturally blurted out a brief summary of this person's life. Nick Flamel, Frenchman, famous alchemist in the 14th century. His most famous contribution was the creation of the alchemist's magic stone, which he used to successfully turn mercury into gold. He is also the only alchemist known to have successfully created the Philosopher's Stone. He used the Philosopher's Stone to create a lot of gold, but most of it was used to fund Beauxbatons School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, one of the 3 major magic schools in Europe. Almost all of the impressive castle and grounds of the ancient magic school belonged to Nico Flamel and his wife Perinnal Flamel. Therefore, the huge fountain on campus is named after the couple. The fountain is said to have restoration and beautification functions. Although I don't like the rumors I'm going to talk about, because rumors are often not true history, many wizards speculate that in addition to making gold, Nick Flamel also used the Philosopher's Stone to create a magic stone called the Elixir Potion. Those people rumored that it was precisely because of taking this potion that Nick Flamel and his wife were able to live from the 14th century to today, for more than 600 years. If you collect pictures of chocolate frogs, you should have seen a sentence in the introduction on Dumbledore's card, "We have achieved many achievements in alchemy with our partner Nicholas Flamel." This achievement mainly refers to the Phoenix script. With the help of Dumbledore, Nicholas Flamel and Dumbledore parsed the language of the Fire Phoenix and transformed it into a writing called Phoenix script. This is the only important invention in the field of modern alchemy that can rival the ancient magic texts. Professor Binns, in his usual lecture tone, told everything he knew, historical ascertainable, about Nick Flamel. It was the first time that Harry and Ron listened so carefully in the history of magic classroom. Although they couldn't understand it since the beginning of Phoenix essay, the previous gains were enough. They finally figured out who Nick Flamel was and what he wanted to give to Dumbledore to keep. The Philosopher's Stone, it must be the Philosopher's Stone. Walking out of the history of magic classroom, Ron could no longer contain his excitement and immediately said to Harry, "If I could have that stone that can convert mercury into gold, I would definitely. It will conjure up piles of gold galleons, and then you can buy whatever you want." "The point is not to conjure gold," Harry lowered his voice and whispered to Ron, "Nick Flamel used the Philosopher's Stone to make the elixir, and you can live forever if you drink it. Even if I think about it with my speckled brain, it is said that this kind of elixir cannot be brewed by ordinary people, but maybe a potion master can." Ron almost yelled out the name, but Harry quickly covered his mouth with his hands and eyes, and then continued to express his inference. "Remember what Bourne said in class? There are currently only 2 potions masters in Britain. One is his grandfather, Professor Slughorn, and the other is Snape." "You're right." Ron nodded in agreement with Harry. "Should we report this to Dumbledore now, or what?" But Harry didn't think this was a good idea. Although they fully believed that Snape was the best suspect, without any conclusive evidence, a few young wizards wanted to accuse a professor of being a dark wizard. It was still a bit taken for granted. "Let's write a letter to Hermione first, telling her about Nick Flamel and attaching our inferences, otherwise she will probably waste her time looking through those tomes during the Christmas vacation." Unlike the Harrow duo who started their vacation in great detective mode, Bourne, who was truly recognized by the great detective Sherlock Holmes, started his vacation in the form of a wooden man. In the factory of sweeping company, he received the same treatment as in Ollivander's wand shop, standing motionless while being measured by a tape measure floating in the air. A wizard craftsman stood next to him, with parchment and quill floating in his hand, constantly recording the data measured by the tape measure. From chest circumference, hip circumference, and foot size, to weight, height, arm span. These data took more than an hour to collect. Eventually, he even had plaster casts of his feet and hands made under the guidance of a model maker. This made the little con standing nearby and watching anxious. He seemed a little anxious, because it could only take its turn after Bourne had finished collecting data. After a series of body data collection was completed, Bourne began to select the materials for the broomstick, and he realized that there were many ways to do it. For example, broomsticks made by Sideswipe's competitor Nimbus come with only 2 choices of broomsticks, mahogany and birch. The hardness of these 2 types of wood can only be considered average and the weight is relatively light, so the maximum speed can be close to the current technical limit of flying broomsticks. However, the former performs better in turning and stopping, while the latter has unique advantages in straight-line acceleration and sprinting. The reason why Nimbus Company generally only has these 2 materials for users to choose from is because their company appeared relatively late and their research time on broom materials is relatively short. For the sake of product reliability, it is impossible for Nimbus Company to use some broom materials that lack data for mass production. As the first large-scale broomstick factory in history to get rid of the Craftsman Workshop model, Sideswipe has existed for a relatively long time and has accumulated rich data from generations of products, so it can provide customers with relatively more choices. A lot of oak, poplar, silver basswood, birch, mahogany, cherry, sandalwood. These woods have historically been used by the Sideswipe company as the main materials for the Sideswipe series of brooms, so as long as Bourne likes them, they can theoretically be used for the broomstick he customized this time. "So, young Mr. Slughorn, which material do you want to choose?" Humphrey asked Bourne holding an album. The atlas specifically shows the properties of various materials and some characteristics of brooms made from them. In fact, when it comes to the choice of vehicle materials, Bourne prefers ceramic steel and plastic steel. Even ordinary steel is more in line with his wishes than wood. However, an alchemical product like a flying broomstick actually takes into account scientific principles such as aerodynamics. It seems that it is not feasible to fly with such force. Therefore, in view of what he saw during the Quidditch match, when Harry's broomstick was affected by the confusion curse, Bourne chose ebony as a broomstick that could be enchanted with stronger curse rebound and curse resistance enchantments. Main materials. That's it. After making a series of customization choices, Bourne finally breathed a sigh of relief. Shopping was indeed more difficult than fighting. Moreover, it still cost 4,000 gold galleons to customize this broomstick, even though he enjoyed the special discount from Sweeping Company because of the reputation of Mr. Weasley and Horace. Chapter 94. As the saying goes, a fisherman is good at everything except fishing. The old man standing in front of Bourne and Horace is the best example. Perhaps, he may be too old to have a real physical contest with the big guy in the pond, but he can't help but have the tools at his disposal. The self-retractable alchemical fishing rod enchanted with the floating spell is hovering under the shade of a weeping willow in the pond, waiting motionless for the fish to take the bait. An alchemy doll, about the size of a human being, was holding a basin of bait that looked like undercooked black pudding and was constantly stirring it to ensure that the bait had the best consistency before being hung on the fish hook. There is also an alchemy object that looks like a golden snitch, flapping its wings and constantly passing over the pond. It is the old fisherman's see-through hanger, which can detect the position of the big fish through the water surface, and can communicate with that used in conjunction with an auto-retractable alchemical fishing rod with a levitating spell attached. Bourne took a closer look and discovered that the semi-floating fishing chair under the old man's butt was actually modified from a flying magic carpet. You know, because the British Ministry of Magic prohibits wizards from using magic carpets, you can basically only buy them through special channels at a premium of 3 to 4 times. A magic carpet may cost more than 2 or 3 broomsticks. Not counting the expensive enchanted clothes this man wears, just the alchemy equipment he uses for fishing. After converting it into gold galleons, it costs 2,000 to equip each player of the Gryffindor Quidditch team with a standard version of the Nimbus. Enough. Looking at this old man who seemed to have the word trench written on his body, coupled with Grandpa Horace's French pronunciation of Nicola just now, the melody of a song immediately jumped out of Bourne's mind. It's him, it's him, it's him. He is Nick Flamel. Maybe the older you get, the more like a child you become. Being disturbed by Horace, a dignified master of alchemy actually put his hands on his hips angrily and accused angrily, "Little Slughorn, you came at the wrong time to take my big stuff." They all ran away. Facing Little Slughorn, whom he had not heard for a long time, Horace's face was slightly embarrassed, but considering that the person who said this was Nick Flamel, a man who has lived for more than 600 years, this young man who is only in his 80s really has no reason to refute this old man. He could only smile, and then introduced the real Little Slughorn to Nick Flamel, that is, Bourne, who was squatting on the edge of the pond and had already put his hand into the water. At this moment, Bourne suddenly reached out and grabbed a small thing, and then thought about it and lifted it out of the water. Why is there still a Kaba in this pond? This thing looks like a scaly monkey with webbed hands, so it is generally called a water monkey in Eastern folklore. There is a hollow filled with water on the top of Kaba's head. The water inside can provide energy for this magical animal. It is said that this magical animal likes to suck human blood and will try to strangle those who are unprepared when wading through the pond. People. Although the word Kaba is a neon name, they are actually more common in Mongolia's rivers and lakes. Then why don't you try feeding it a cucumber? Nick Flamel made a suggestion to Bourne with a smile. It was precisely because of what the old man said that Horace, who had already taken out his wand and wanted to deal with this water monkey, which was a little dangerous to ordinary little wizards, put his wand back again. Kaba punched and kicked in Bourne's hands, but could not break free from his restraints. The alchemy doll won't eat cucumbers. Bourne shrugged and said, although I don't know why it relies on the water in the depression on its head to stay alive like the real Kaba. Then, he put the Kaba into the water. As the concave bowl on top of its head fills with water, it can dive freely underwater again. In fact, the reason why it can move is because I feed it some magic power regularly. Nick Flamel sat down in his fishing chair. Obviously, for Bourne, who could tell at a glance that Kaba was just an alchemy doll, his answer this time was not to fool a child. Moreover, after he finished speaking, he turned around and asked Horace, "Little Slughorn, have you ever mentioned something about me to this little Mr. Slughorn?" After receiving a negative reply from Horace, Nick Flamel became even more curious, so he asked Bourne, "So little wizard, how did you tell that Kaba is an alchemy doll? If I remember correctly, in other words, its skin does not have any of the ancient magic scripts that are commonly found on alchemical items." I have hidden those ancient magic words in its body. Originally, Nick Flamel thought that Bourne would take out a magnet or something, or tell him the difference between the Kaaba alchemy doll and the real Kaaba from the perspective of magical zoology morphology. Nick, most of Flamel's knowledge about magical animals is based on books, and there are inevitably some errors and omissions. Originally, when he was young, he preferred to stay comfortably at home instead of venturing into the wild. Now at this age, his physical condition is even worse. Not allowed anymore. However, what he didn't expect was that the little wizard actually took out a deformed lizard wallet, and then took out a chainsaw sword that looked like a utilitarian style from the wallet. Excellent alchemical creations can give birth to organic souls, just like this loyal chain sword. When he said this, the chain sword in his hand immediately buzzed in conjunction with Bourne's words. The Kaaba was held in my hand, and I could feel its displeasure. Nick Flamel's eyes lit up. Immediately afterwards, the old man with an overly fair complexion sat upright from the fishing chair and continued to ask, "Can you tell me more carefully?" Thanks to participating in Professor McGonagall's Saturday Club, he has a full understanding of the differences between alchemy and transfiguration. In addition, he had experience in using alchemy to transform and repair chain swords, so Bourne was not afraid to express some of his opinions. Even alchemy masters like Nick Flamel kept nodding their heads after listening to part of what Bourne said. However, some old men gave 3 consecutive denials after listening to it. I'm not, don't talk nonsense. Then there's no way to explain it. If you hadn't let it lurk on the shore, and if you really couldn't catch any fish, just let it hang one on the hook for you, the machine soul of the Kaaba alchemy doll wouldn't have thought it was possible. It's overkill, so I'm not happy. Bourne spread his hands. It's not cute for a child to talk like this. What's more, at your age, how can you know anything about fishing? Nick Flamel retorted angrily. So, Bourne simply showed off his cards and stopped pretending. Of all of you present, there is probably no one who knows how to fish better than him. After all, a real fisherman doesn't play with mysteries and always judges heroes based on big stuff. And for Bourne, who has fished for bladefish, ripfish, captured value whales on the planet Fenris, and even participated in kraken hunting activities, fishing in this small pond is not too easy. Chapter 95. Many old friends will come, Mrs. Perennial said in a calm tone. We must not neglect these guests. Horace nodded thoughtfully. Combined with some recent rumours, and the fact that they were 2 Frenchmen who were going to live in seclusion in Devonshire, Britain, he had vaguely guessed the purpose of the Flamel couple's purpose of hosting this party. As the sun sets, a clock stands in the foyer of LeMay's country house. With the pendulum swinging, the hour hand gradually points to 17 o'clock. When the hands pointed accurately at 17 o'clock, the dial of the clock suddenly changed into another appearance. A turntable with many photos printed on it appeared in the center of the dial and began to rotate continuously. From time to time, it would suddenly stop, a photo with a person's name would appear on the dial, and the door of the big house would unlock the double blockade of the alchemical machine with a click. Eulalie Hicks, Professor of Charms at Ilvermorny School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and head of the Horned Water Snake School since 1920. Bathilda Bagshot, the author of A History of Magic, this witch is over 160 years old. She was a neighbor and friend of the Dumbledore family, and was also Grindelwald's great-aunt. Chsilda Marchbane, the British Ministry of Magic is a lifelong consultant to the Wizarding Examination Authority. This serious old witch was once the examiner of the Newt's exam when Principal Dumbledore was in school. One after another, real old wizards, witches, walked into the country house of the Flamel couple. Against their background, even Bourne's grandfather Horace can only be regarded as a young man. Especially, when an old wizard wearing a red velvet cloak walked into the door, Horace stood up from his seat and walked to the door to greet the old man who looked somewhat similar to Dumbledore. Principal Dippet, long time no see. Horace first shook the old man's hand cordially, and then helped him hang his cloak on the hanger in the hall. This old man's name is Armando Dippet. Not only does he look somewhat similar to Dumbledore, he also has the exact same identity as the latter. He is also the headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Moreover, Armando Dippet was not only Horace Slughorn's old leader, but also his teacher when he was in school. He is over 390 years old this year. When he took office as the principal of Hogwarts, he was already over 300 years old, and his qualifications were so senior that no one could comment on him. Principal Dippet was obviously very happy to see Horace, a familiar junior, and he also showed enough kindness to Bourne, the grandson of an old acquaintance. He told Bourne that if he encountered any difficulties at Hogwarts, he could go to the left corridor on the first floor of the main building to find a magical portrait with a gold border. That portrait was one of the 2 paintings he kept in the castle, and the other was in the headmaster's office. The 2 paintings could easily communicate and convey his opinions to Dumbledore. Bourne was very surprised. He originally thought that magical portraits were left behind by wizards after they died. He never thought that living wizards could also have their own magical portraits. In addition, one of the paintings of the former Principal Dippet was specially left in the principal's office. Bourne felt that this looked a bit like listening to politics behind curtains, dense fog. The last 2 people to enter the big room were 2 wizards, a man and a woman. Bourne knew the wizard among them, because this person was Professor Newt Scamander, who was teaching at Hogwarts. The witch is Professor Scamander's wife, named Tina Goldstein. Even when Ms. Goldstein got married, she did not take her husband's surname because she was a fairly independent female surname. Although with Professor Scamander's subsequent income, the family will definitely not be short of gold galleons, gold pot, but the only thing that shines on Ms. Goldstein is the locket on her chest. Her accessory is a silver device called the Admonisher on her waist, a magic tracker similar to a speculum that flashes red when there is danger. Her dressing style illustrates her pragmatism character traits. Because of the exchange at school, Bourne took the initiative to say hello to Professor Scamander and his wife. Ms. Goldstein obviously liked such a polite little wizard and gave him a few ice cubes with the freezing spell. Sealed fire ash snake eggs. When your Professor Scamander saw me when he was young, he used the phrase "your eyes are like fire ash snake eggs" to describe me. At that time, I thought that fire ash snake eggs might be the British wizard's praise for following the rules. The words of a disciplined person, Ms. Goldstein explained to Bourne with a smile. While speaking, she glanced at her husband specifically, and the old wizard, who was already in his 70s, couldn't help but blush. Mr. and Mrs. LeMay, who were sitting at the main table at the long table, kept smiling as they looked at the young friends who greeted each other after entering the room and taking their seats. They waited until they were almost done reminiscing about old times before announcing the official start of the dinner. As Nick Flamel struck the silver wine glass with a salad fork, everyone's favorite drink automatically appeared in the tall silver glass in front of everyone, and what appeared in Bourne's glass was orange-flavored sparkling water. To friendship. LeMay and his wife stood up and raised their glasses to greet everyone, and everyone also stood up and raised their glasses to express their gratitude to the host. Friends, thank you all for coming to my and Perinal's country house in Devon tonight, Nico Flamel said very modestly. He said that the 3 floors of the house totaled more than 1,000 square feet. For the cottage, though, he clearly didn't mean to show off his wealth. The great alchemist showed a completely different demeanor from when he was fishing in the afternoon. He was not as casual as a fisherman at all, even though his words and sentences were deliberately made more humorous. I have gathered you all here today, and besides wanting to show off Perinal's secret recipe as usual, I have 2 things I want to announce to you. The first one is that Perinal and I are no longer prepared to keep the Philosopher's Stone. We will give it to Dumbledore for study. After our current stockpile of elixirs had been consumed, we both prepared to meet death. To see this new adventure. When Nick Flamel said these words, the reactions of all the old wizards, witches, present immediately became different. Like Principal Dippet, none of the wizards who were over 200 or 300 years old showed expressions of surprise or sadness. They just applauded slightly, expressing their respect for the great alchemist's decision. Young people like Horace, who was only 80 or 90 years old, mostly acted a little shocked. They seemed to be unable to understand why Nick Flamel gave up the chance of immortality that most people can only dream of. Bourne, the youngest person present, was not too surprised by Nick LeMay's decision. First of all, he originally remembered that this is what the great alchemist did in the Harry Potter story. Secondly, it is because he has communicated with several dreadnought mechas in the Warhammer universe before and can understand some of the mentality of these elderly people. Chapter 96. Compared with Armando Dippet's sophistication, some of the other people attending the dinner of the Flamel couple were not so steady. A black wizard wearing a traditional white robe from North Africa suddenly stood up from his chair. He wore a heavy-looking solid gold earring on his left ear, and a whole sapphire for his right eyeball. They were replaced with artificial eyes, and all 10 fingers on both hands were covered with rings made of gold and silver. Master Flamel, said the young and old wizard named Babajid Abekinda in a loud voice, I will go out to see who the thieves are, and ask who gave them the courage to disturb the party you held. After saying that, he didn't wait for anyone else's reaction, and disappeared from his seat with a swish in the next second. Looking at the alchemy master who stretched out his hand to grab Babajid but was a little too late, and finally could only shake his head helplessly, for no reason, Bourne thought of an old saying that probably only he could understand: "Trees, I want to be quiet but the wind doesn't stop." Cough cough. Seeing that the atmosphere of the party had become a little tense, Horace coughed twice, and then raised his hand to speak like a little wizard in his student days. "Teacher LeMay." In front of everyone, Horace did not use the somewhat casual but actually more affectionate title of Nicholas, but instead used the honorific title to call the old-timer Nick Flamel. "I think Principal Dippet's suggestion may be necessary. After all, not many people know about your country house in Devon. Other than that, I want to go out and keep an eye on it now. You know, that guy Babajid has always had such a hot temper. I'm worried, if he damages all the flowers and plants in your yard, as well as the fish pond, it will be difficult to clean up." Horace said it more tactfully, but he also had good intentions. Nick Flamel thought about it and nodded in agreement with his opinion. "Thank you, Horace, for always thinking of things so carefully." A kind smile appeared on Mrs. Perenel's wrinkled face, and she assured Horace at the same time, "Leave Bourne here, we old people like to watch the children eat and drink. I guess he will like the quiche Lorraine that will be served soon." Finally, several wizards and witches went out with Horace to keep an eye on Babajid lest he destroy the flowers and plants in Flamel's courtyard. Most of these people are around 70 or 80 years old, and they belong to the young people in this dinner party. The oldest among them is just a witch in her 90s. Her surname is Pruitt, and she is also the great-aunt of the wife of Arthur Weasley, the current head of the Weasley family. She wears an emerald green gem pendant on her chest. It stands to reason that including Babajid, who later succeeded Dumbledore as the president of the International Confederation of Wizards, this small temporary team formed to deal with unreasonable intruders can go anywhere in the wizarding world. Basically, they will have the qualifications, prestige, and more importantly, magical power to make most people shut up and obey. However, Bourne had an intuition at this time: today's Christmas Eve will not be too peaceful. After all, as a traveler in the Warhammer world, he firmly believes that trouble will always comply with the law of convergence. When an ordinary person discovers a gene stealer, there is probably a family of gene stealers hidden in the hive where he is located, and when an inquisitor of the Inquisition discovers a chicken thief, then the planet where he is located, then it might not be long before we encounter a tyrannid fleet. Nick Flamel, the master of alchemy, and a group of old wizards summoned by him to attend the party, the trouble these people can attract may be more troublesome than they imagined. What you think does make sense. Professor Quirrell, who was lying on the bed, raised his upper body like a walrus raising its head, and sit up from the bed in a strange way. Ever since he was bitten by a rune snake in the Forbidden Forest, Tom, who was physically and mentally devastated, has remained relatively calm during this period. Apart from training Quirrell on a daily basis, he didn't do anything too out of the ordinary. Even if Dumbledore approached him alone once and asked him to set up a protection measure for something that needs to be kept safe, he just submitted a report on the effectiveness of using trolls to block doors in small spaces. Sex recommendation report. He didn't even ask the principal to arrange the protective measures himself so that he could be closer to the thing that needed to be kept safe. Taking advantage of this Christmas holiday, I really should recruit some helpers to avoid encountering that kind of weak situation again. Voldemort controlled Quirrell's body and asked him to take out a bottle of mermaid blood that was supposed to be used as a teaching prop from the drawer of his desk. This was something he deliberately saved when he was teaching how to deal with Grindylow. Ingredients: holding back the unpleasant fishy smell, pour it into your mouth. Belch. Quirrell burped. He didn't eat breakfast or lunch. He was full of water just by drinking this unpleasant blood. Only he knew how sour and refreshing it felt. My lord, you can use that dark mark to summon your loyal servants. I think once they receive the message. Quirrell really didn't want to carry it on his own anymore. He desperately hoped that Voldemort could find someone else to share the burden with him, even if he could have a replacement possessed host. He felt that if he continued to be tortured like this, he would really be unable to hold on. Idiot! But before he could finish speaking, Voldemort interrupted his suggestion with his usual words. Last time, I have used the dark mark, and Snape must have noticed it. Although it is not certain whether he has remained loyal, but based on the wariness he showed towards you, if I use the dark mark again now, do you think he will come over and talk to you heart to heart with his wand? During the Christmas holiday, not only the little wizards, but also some professors in Hogwarts choose to go home to reunite with their families. As far as Voldemort knew, apart from those possessed by him, Snape and McGonagall were the only two professors left in the castle during the holidays, and he was not sure whether Principal Dumbledore would leave. And once he summons the dark mark, the closer the distance is, the stronger the feeling of the mark holder will be. In other words, with the simple elimination method, the clever Snape could accurately pinpoint the Quirrell possessed by him. Quirrell couldn't help but trembled when he heard "take out your heart and lungs." He had experienced having his waist ripped out, and he didn't want his other internal organs to be forcibly replaced with new ones by Voldemort's spells. It would be too painful. Ignoring all the boring reveries in Quirrell's mind, Voldemort directly gave him action instructions. Although Gion's intention to use the dark mark to find help was indeed foolish, his idea of doing something while there were fewer people in school during the Christmas holidays was quite in line with Voldemort's wishes. That corridor has been repaired. It's noon now, and Peeves and Snape probably won't be wandering there. He said, "You go to the abandoned women's bathroom now. What we're looking for is, like-minded friends are there." Chapter 97. London, Ministry of Magic. Because of the Christmas holiday, there are not many people left on duty in this huge building complex deep underground in Whitehall. Except for a few departments. And among these very few, there is no doubt that the Department of Mysteries, known as the most mysterious department of the British Ministry of Magic, is included. 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, the Department of Mysteries, a 9-story building located underground in the Ministry of Magic, must have a silent man on duty. Although except for those silent people, even the Minister of Magic and the director of this department do not know the specific content of their work, this rule has been strictly implemented from 1689 to the present. In 1689, the British Muggles promulgated the Bill of Rights and established a constitutional monarchy. At that time, the Ministry of Magic was only involved in some activities of the International Federation of Wizards in the form of its predecessor, the British Council of Wizards. It was not until 1707 that the British Ministry of Magic officially appeared, and Ulrich Gamp was elected as the first Minister of Magic. However, whether it is the Ministry of Magic, the Magic Council, or the older Wizengamot Wizards Council, these governing bodies of wizarding social order on the British Isles have actually always been headquartered where the Ministry of Magic is now. Of this location. In other words, the history of the underground office building of the Ministry of Magic headquarters is actually much longer than the history of the Ministry of Magic. The reason for this is because the 9th floor underground of this office building is the Department of Mysteries, and the place where this organization is located is actually a site suspected to be the ruins of an ancient wizard or a large druid sect. P.S. Many wizards in Harry Potter have beliefs, and Umbridge believes in druids. The Wizengamot's trial chamber is on the 10th floor underground, and the main hall of the Ministry of Magic, which was the original office of the British Magical Council, is on the 8th floor underground. The two sandwich the 9th floor underground where the Department of Mysteries is located. The purpose of why generations of British wizarding authorities have deliberately created and retained such an architectural pattern is self-evident. Instead of being researchers, we should be called the guardians of taboos. In a dark, messy small office, a slovenly old man sat on a chair in his office, speaking to the air across a long ebony table that had been rubbed to some pulp. This is his daily job, 3 times a day, morning, noon, and evening, remind all the silent people of their true responsibilities. His name is Broderick Bird, a silent man in charge of the brain hall of the Department of Mysteries and the director of the Department of Mysteries. And he is also the only person in the Department of Mysteries who has an independent office. However, this office only has 1 desk, 1 bookshelf, and surrounding stone walls. It seems that the size can only accommodate up to 4 or 5 people. No more than that. I can't even stand any more. On the table in front of him was a sink made of a whole piece of New Zealand parrot green jade, which was divided into 5 equal parts. Each slot contains some translucent magic potion that emits gleaming white light. 4 living brains are soaked in this potion. Except 1 slot is empty. These 4 brains are the brains of Director Bode's only 3 subordinates and himself. The moment he fulfills his duties and becomes a silent person, the silent person's brain will be taken from the wizard's head using a special magic. Come out and put it in this sink for temporary storage. This is not only a supervision measure, but also a protection for the silent people. The potion in the tank is taken from the huge brain pool in the brain hall of the Department of Mysteries. It can ensure that the brains of the silent people remain active, and can also protect them from being destroyed by most curses, jinxes and even almost all physical means. When ordinary mutes retire, they can use a reversal spell to remove their brains and reinstall them into their skulls. The only exception is Director Bode. According to the secret contract passed down by the Department of Mysteries, he still needs to have his successor perform an amnestic on him to erase some secrets about the Department of Mysteries that cannot be told to anyone before he can retire smoothly. Originally, the director, who was already in his 60s, had arranged everything when he was in his 50s just like his predecessor. However, something happened to the successor appointed by Director Bode 11 years ago. He was confessed by his associates to be a Death Eater lurking in the Ministry of Magic, and was sent to Azkaban prison after trial. And this has also resulted in Director Bode, who has already been able to receive his pension, now having to persist in this cramped office for a while longer. Until a suitable candidate for the next Director General is found, he will be able to relieve himself of the responsibilities he has shouldered. After completing the daily admonishment as usual, Director Bode took out a silk sweat towel and wiped the sweat from his forehead. The heating in the Ministry of Magic seemed to be getting more and more powerful recently. Some people speculate that this may be because the Magical Maintenance Service secretly connected the heating pipes of Whitehall to the Ministry of Magic in order to reduce the consumption of firewood in the fireplace once and for all. Haha, the Ministry of Magic is going to take advantage of the Muggles and steal their technological achievements. As an old-school wizard, Bode is not very interested in this kind of opportunism, and even hates it. He is even more puzzled as to why current Minister Fudge would tolerate such behavior. If we go back 10 years, he would have publicly reported this unethical behavior to the Wizengamot Council members during a director-level meeting. But after all, he is now over 60, and has long lost the spirit of his youth. What he really cares about now is the big issue of who to choose as his successor. August Rookwood, silently chanting the name of the owner of the brain in the vacant jade tank that was taken away 10 years ago, "You are really causing me a lot of trouble." August Rookwood is the name of the Death Eater lurking in the Department of Mysteries. Although he is not from the Holy 20,8 family, he is also a pure-blood wizard. After entering the Ministry of Magic, Rookwood took the initiative to sign up to be a pre-selector for the Silent Man, and relied on qualifications to become a genuine Silent Man. This Rookwood is very talented at being a Silent Man, at least in Director Bode's opinion, because he is a taciturn wizard. When he was taken away by the Aurors, Director Border lamented the loss of this talent for a long time, and finally reluctantly handed over Rookwood's brain. It was put back into Luke inside Wood's head. The brain is the material carrier of human emotions. If a criminal who is thrown into Azkaban prison and is managed by Dementors does not have a brain, the punishment will be meaningless. Perhaps because of his age, or perhaps because of the holidays, Director Bode felt inexplicably sentimental when thinking of this Rookwood. I don't know what happened to that guy. He was imprisoned in Azkaban for so long. Is he crazy now or is he simply gone? Flamel's country estate, Devon. The great mage Babajid from Africa appeared in the bush maze. As a guest, he could apparate in the manor with an invitation from Nico Flamel. Chapter 98. Babajid didn't know whether the alchemy dummy in front of him had a brain, but he immediately knew that this guy had other accomplices. Just when Horace and several young old wizards came to him and were about to check the brains of these intruders, two muffled sounds of boom and boom suddenly came from outside the country manor. This is Professor Hicks, a well-informed professor from the United States, immediately realized that something was wrong. The dark-skinned old witch first opened her eyes wide in surprise, and then immediately spoke loudly at a speed that could bang her head with a wrapper. A reminder was sent to everyone. There's a fire in the cave. However, it was not the companions in the bush maze that she should remind, but the older ladies and old men who were still in the house. Accompanied by a slight scream, 2 mortar shells flew out of the muzzle, crossing 2 parabolas and falling accurately towards the LeMay family's country house. These 2 mortars are both 2-inch caliber small smashing cannons that were completely eliminated by the British Army a few years ago. However, as a weapon that has been installed since before World War II and can still be seen in some areas until the 21st century, the reliability of this weapon and equipment is still very strong. What is worth writing about is that in the weapon in terms of lubrication, British mortarmen have always had an excellent tradition. The shells they fire are 2-pound shells that are a little over 1 kilogram. They are definitely not good enough to deal with concrete reinforced facilities. But they are a bit too much to use to bomb the traditional thatched roof houses in Devon. What's more, this small cannon is very easy to operate, and a skilled gunner can fire up to 17 or 8 rounds per minute. Even if you are a novice, it is not difficult to fire 11 or 2 shells per minute with a little practice. The 2 gunners operating the 2-inch cannon fired all the dozen or so shells they carried in less than half a minute after firing. In other words, within 10 seconds, LeMay's country house was hit by mortar shells with a total weight of nearly 30 pounds. These shells are also high explosive shells. Even if they are relatively outdated, after hitting a house, they still show the same effect as the thunderbolt explosion curse. In short, the house collapsed. The young and old wizards in the bush maze were all shocked. Merlin not only lost a lot of beard, but also had several pairs of messy underwear. However, after all, they are some old men and women who have seen strong winds and waves. There was no need to discuss at all, they immediately responded relatively correctly. They took the initiative to divide into 3 groups. 2 old wizards who seemed to be twins used their wands to conjure a heavy iron chain, tied up several knockdown intruders on the ground, and took the initiative to take on the task of guarding these guys. Some of them are represented by Babajid and Professor Hicks, who both served as aurors when they were young, or participated in the battle against the Saints of Grindelwald. The birds are heavy. Professor Hicks recited a spell, and a swarm of doves flew out of her wand. Not only that, her magic book, which was tied with a mithril chain like a bag and slung around her waist, also floated and opened automatically without any wind. As the pages of the book turned swish, some spells written in advance in ancient magic script also flew out of the book in a flash. They found the pigeons. As if a replication spell had been cast, the number of pigeons in the group doubled several times in an instant. The pigeons whistled and flew toward a headland near the sea to the west. This is where the mortars were fired just now. Even if these old wizards don't know much about Muggle combat, they are familiar with the strategy of offense is the best defense. There were 3 people on the promontory, and unlike the guys who invaded from the main entrance, there was also a wizard among these people who was on guard with a wand. When the pigeons flew over, the wizard with the magic wand directly used the blazing flame to turn a group of pigeons into roasted pigeons. The 2 men who had just finished shooting the mortar also took out their submachine guns for self-defense and pointed them at the pigeons that slipped through the net kept firing. These pigeons must be killed. The wizard with the wand said the right thing. It's a pity that he only had time to say the right thing. In the wizard's battle mode, the spell Birds of Weight has always been just a cover-up. When an experienced wizard uses this spell, he will definitely cooperate with a sneak attack without witchcraft ethics. Fainted. Professor Hicks and a wizard suddenly appeared and cast spells on the 2 guys with submachine guns from behind. At the same time, a pigeon that slipped through the net instantly transformed into a huge African elephant. It hit the ground from a height of more than 2 meters and rubbed the wizard's wand with its hooves. Arm. The moment he landed, Babajid released the animagus and returned to his human form. Collapse. He also added a spell. Although the old man has a hot temper, it does not mean that he has no emotional intelligence. The most important thing when doing activities with his companions is to be gregarious. Babajid nodded to his 2 old friends and said, "Take these people back and all the things they brought." He emphasized all. Because of the excellent matching mechanism in the Afika region, Babajid is no stranger to Muggle gadgets such as long guns and short cannons. But when he raided the headland position, he discovered that the invaders not only carried guns and mortars, but also brought some other things. For example, the periscope-like bubble-level optical sight, another example, the contour military map that most Muggles cannot understand, and the firepower extension gun table adapted to the 2 mortars. This showed that these people were not the low-level armed thugs he had seen in the Afika area who could only raise the Muggle wand above their heads and shoot casually. And an attack involving professionals against a well-known alchemist in the magic world, especially Nick Flamel, a Frenchman who was carefully hiding in Devon, England during this period, is hard not to let go. It reminds me of some conspiracy. However, because they had to carry the 3 unconscious prisoners, they couldn't use apparition. In the end, Professor Hicks could only use the levitation spell to follow the captives. Babajid and another old wizard rushed to old Flamel's house first to see what was going on. The situation is not good. Looking at the LeMay mansion that had been blown into ruins, Horace felt a thump in his heart. The old man was a little worried about his grandson. Even if he knew it well, the old men and women in this house should actually be able to handle a crisis of that magnitude just now. Defodio. Chapter 99. Babajid didn't know whether the alchemy dummy in front of him had a brain, but he immediately knew that this guy had other accomplices. Just when Horace and several young old wizards came to him and were about to check the brains of these intruders, 2 muffled sounds of boom and boom suddenly came from outside the country manor. This is Professor Hicks, a well-informed professor from the United States, immediately realized that something was wrong. The dark-skinned old witch first opened her eyes wide in surprise, and then immediately spoke loudly at a speed that could bang her head with a wrapper. A reminder was sent to everyone. There's a fire in the cave. However, it was not the companions in the bush maze that she should remind, but the older ladies and old men who were still in the house. Accompanied by a slight scream, 2 mortar shells flew out of the muzzle, crossing 2 parabolas and falling accurately towards the LeMay family's country house. These 2 mortars are both 2-inch caliber small smashing cannons that were completely eliminated by the British Army a few years ago. However, as a weapon that has been installed since before World War II and can still be seen in some areas until the 21st century, the reliability of this weapon and equipment is still very strong. What is worth writing about is that in the weapon in terms of lubrication, British mortarmen have always had an excellent tradition. The shells they fire are 2-pound shells that are a little over 1 kilogram. They are definitely not good enough to deal with concrete reinforced facilities. But they are a bit too much to use to bomb the traditional thatched roof houses in Devon. What's more, this small cannon is very easy to operate, and a skilled gunner can fire up to 17 or 8 rounds per minute. Even if you are a novice, it is not difficult to fire 11 or 2 shells per minute with a little practice. The 2 gunners operating the 2-inch cannon fired all the dozen or so shells they carried in less than half a minute after firing. In other words, within 10 seconds, LeMay's country house was hit by mortar shells with a total weight of nearly 30 pounds. These shells are also high explosive shells. Even if they are relatively outdated, after hitting a house, they still show the same effect as the thunderbolt explosion curse. In short, the house collapsed. The young and old wizards in the bush maze were all shocked. Merlin not only lost a lot of beard, but also had several pairs of messy underwear. However, after all, they are some old men and women who have seen strong winds and waves. There was no need to discuss at all, they immediately responded relatively correctly. They took the initiative to divide into 3 groups. 2 old wizards who seemed to be twins used their wands to conjure a heavy iron chain, tied up several knockdown intruders on the ground, and took the initiative to take on the task of guarding these guys. Some of them are represented by Babajid and Professor Hicks, who both served as aurors when they were young, or participated in the battle against the Saints of Grindelwald. The birds are heavy. Professor Hicks recited a spell, and a swarm of doves flew out of her wand. Not only that, her magic book, which was tied with a mithril chain like a bag and slung around her waist, also floated and opened automatically without any wind. As the pages of the book turned swish, some spells written in advance in ancient magic script also flew out of the book in a flash. They found the pigeons. As if a replication spell had been cast, the number of pigeons in the group doubled several times in an instant. The pigeons whistled and flew toward a headland near the sea to the west. This is where the mortars were fired just now. Even if these old wizards don't know much about Muggle combat, they are familiar with the strategy of offense is the best defense. There were 3 people on the promontory, and unlike the guys who invaded from the main entrance, there was also a wizard among these people who was on guard with a wand. When the pigeons flew over, the wizard with the magic wand directly used the blazing flame to turn a group of pigeons into roasted pigeons. The 2 men who had just finished shooting the mortar also took out their submachine guns for self-defense and pointed them at the pigeons that slipped through the net kept firing. These pigeons must be killed. The wizard with the wand said the right thing. It's a pity that he only had time to say the right thing. In the wizard's battle mode, the spell Birds of Weight has always been just a cover-up. When an experienced wizard uses this spell, he will definitely cooperate with a sneak attack without witchcraft ethics. Fainted. Professor Hicks and a wizard suddenly appeared and cast spells on the 2 guys with submachine guns from behind. At the same time, a pigeon that slipped through the net instantly transformed into a huge African elephant. It hit the ground from a height of more than 2 meters and rubbed the wizard's wand with its hooves. Arm. The moment he landed, Babajid released the animagus and returned to his human form. Collapse. He also added a spell. Although the old man has a hot temper, it does not mean that he has no emotional intelligence. The most important thing when doing activities with his companions is to be gregarious. Babajid nodded to his 2 old friends and said, "Take these people back and all the things they brought." He emphasized all. Because of the excellent matching mechanism in the Afika region, Babajid is no stranger to Muggle gadgets such as long guns and short cannons. But when he raided the headland position, he discovered that the invaders not only carried guns and mortars, but also brought some other things. For example, the periscope-like bubble-level optical sight, another example, the contour military map that most Muggles cannot understand, and the firepower extension gun table adapted to the 2 mortars. This showed that these people were not the low-level armed thugs he had seen in the Afika area who could only raise the muggle wand above their heads and shoot casually. And an attack involving professionals against a well-known alchemist in the magic world, especially Nick Flamel, a Frenchman who was carefully hiding in Devon, England during this period, is hard not to let go. It reminds me of some conspiracy. However, because they had to carry the 3 unconscious prisoners, they couldn't use apparition. In the end, Professor Hicks could only use the levitation spell to follow the captives. Babajid and another old wizard rushed to old Flamel's house first to see what was going on. The situation is not good. Looking at the LeMay mansion that had been blown into ruins, Horace felt a thump in his heart. The old man was a little worried about his grandson. Even if he knew it well, the old men and women in this house should actually be able to handle a crisis of that magnitude just now. Defodio. Chapter 100. Marlowe made his point. But his apparent toughness was just to get a bigger percentage of the next business, and he didn't really want to get rid of August. Therefore, the conversation between them finally ended courteously, and August Lukewood, with a stiff expression, got into the car of the 3 Marlowe brothers. A dedicated driver opens the door for them. Father Benjamin gave August a polite pat and asked him to sit in the back seat. The priest showed the humility of a clergyman and insisted on sitting in the middle seat and letting August sit by the window, because he felt that Michael must see the beautiful night view of Palermo. Don Marlowe sat down on the other side of the back seat. Enzo had already gotten into the car and sat in the passenger seat. August noticed that the public official was holding on to the door handle so that he could quickly open the door at any time. August thought to himself that Father Benjamin quickly sat in the middle seat, probably to reduce the possibility of becoming a target. The car drove slowly along the streets of Palermo like a giant turtle, followed by several vans filled by friends of friends' brothers. Some of them would get out of the car when passing a certain intersection. Catch the tram passing here. Work is work, and get off work is get off work. After receiving August Rookwood, the Marlowe brothers will no longer continue to pay them overtime pay. Except for those who can still receive money, the rest will naturally not continue to provide free bodyguard protection. On both sides of this avenue, there are elegant Moorish houses, huge public buildings with Greek columns and Spanish churches. The private villas were painted blue, white, and yellow, and all had balconies filled with flowers, creating a sky corridor above their heads. In Palermo at night, there were almost no cars on the streets. Even after walking so far, we didn't even see a patrolling police car. Their cars stand out from the crowd. The most common means of transportation they saw were mule carts heading home from the city after collecting some scraps or kitchen waste. However, those mule carts were painted in vivid and bright colors, even the spokes of the wheels and the shafts of the mule carts were no exception. The sides of many mule carts are painted with rich paintings, including warriors wearing helmets and kings wearing crowns. These characters all come from the ancient folklore passed down from Sicily about Charlemagne and the paladin Roland. The car, which was traveling at a constant speed, stopped in front of a rose-colored building that spanned a block. There is a YSL-style blue spire on each corner of the building, and there is a unique canopy with a wide green stripe outside the door, with the words Umberto Hotel printed on it. Being named after the King of Italy, you can imagine that the standards of this hotel are unparalleled in Palermo. 2 doormen stood at the door of the lobby, the buttons on their uniforms shining with gold. The experienced eyes developed through their careers have enabled them to clearly see the situation around the hotel. They saw at least 10 bodyguards walking in groups of 2 on the street or leaning against iron railings. These people were very flamboyant, with their open jackets revealing the weapons they carried. Therefore, the 2 doormen became very cautious when the car came, and their already straight bodies stood up straighter. When Auguste Rookwood got out of the car, 2 cigar-smoking men stood in front of him. They were Marlowe's friends among friends who had arrived here first. They looked at the British guy carefully, as if they wanted to visually measure his height and prepare to dig a grave for him. After the group entered, the bodyguards blocked the entrance to the hotel. 4 bodyguards came from the hall and led them into a corridor. The faces of these people were filled with the superiority of the emperor's attendants. At the end of the corridor are 2 oak doors. A man sitting in a luxurious high-backed chair stood up and opened the door with a brass key. He bowed and smiled slyly at Father Benjamin. This is a luxurious suite, with French floor-to-ceiling windows open, letting in the cool evening breeze. Outside the window is a large, well-tended garden, with fragrance from the lemon trees in the garden from time to time. The furniture in the suite's living room was originally designed for a palace of an Italian king. The armchairs were huge, the sofa was long and deep like a boat, and the huge marble table looked like it had been stolen from a museum. As if by magic, or maybe he really used magic, after entering this suite, Don Mallow had 2 goblets in his hands, which contained more than half of a glass of slightly turbid wine. Plant local white grapes. Do as the Romans do, Marlowe handed a wine glass to August. People here don't like fire whiskey and grog very much, but they have a special liking for this kind of white wine. He seemed to be implying something. However, August didn't care. He took the wine glass and rubbed the glass leg of the goblet with his index finger and thumb, but did not put it in his mouth. Don Marlowe didn't seem to care either. He just sat down on the huge bohemian-style sofa and let his body be wrapped in the soft velvet material. His 2 brothers each found a single sofa and sat down. It's just that, unless he sits on the same sofa as Don Mallow, there will be no seat for Auguste Roquette in this suite. This Hotel Umberto is my property, and its underground wine cellar hides the entrance to the Italian Ministry of Magic. Today is a holiday, and during normal working days, there are always some wizards in the back alley of this hotel. Coming and going. Don Mallow took a sip of white wine, pinched the tie around his neck with his fingers, and loosened it with force. Unlike your British Ministry of Magic, which is rich and wealthy, our Ministry of Magic here does not have such a large budget and cannot hide its headquarters in big cities like Rome and Milan, so it can only settle in a small place like Palermo. August knew this man was talking nonsense. The real reason why the Italian Ministry of Magic is located in Sicily is because in 1754, the Italian Minister of Magic and the British Minister of Magic Hephaestus Scorcio hosted a famous broom racing competition from Aberdeen to Rome. The contestants in the sprint were 2 of the most famous riders in Europe at the time, Torquil MacTavish and Silvio Astolfi. In order to avoid attracting the attention of Muggles, the entire race was held in the evening, while ministerial representatives and fans all gathered at the Colosseum, waiting for the arrival of the contestants. However, just as the 2 men could be seen flying towards the amphitheater, clashes broke out between supporters from both sides. A series of explosions occurred during the conflict, which almost led to the demolition of the Colosseum. At that time, one of the accompanying British representatives was a staff member of the Department for the Prohibition of the Abuse of Magic, named Arabella Nutley. She was originally responsible for handling luggage and preparing door keys. After seeing this scene, she immediately stood up and repaired some pillars with a spell she invented. That spell is the Restoration spell, and chanting it can repair most non-magical, inanimate objects.